Good morning, everyone, and good to see everyone here. Tracy's first off the rack. G'day, Tracy. And she'll be back. I've heard that before. I'll be back. Alex, Ajax, jumping in with a question before the chat. He's flooded, and I'm looking for a good idea, actually, looking for a solid carnivore coach specialist that can work with in Melbourne, Oz. Can anyone recommend one? I can't. I mean, there is the Steak and Butter Gang and Raymond and a couple of other people that you could actually contact there, and that's one option. You don't have to necessarily have a physical presence, but if you want a physical presence, um, there's probably some, just you Google, Melbourne Carnivore Community or something like that, and you're bound to find some people and maybe a couple of doctors that are basically part of it. I know that in Sydney, some people actually contacted or go to Paul Mason as their physician or have contacts with him. So there are some options there to look into to actually get somebody that actually knows what they're talking about and doesn't actually believe in a whole lot of myths, which is unfortunately the situation, as my two recent videos have shown, that people believe in all sorts of strange and funny things, and then they end up going down the repeat pathway with 100 grams of carbs. Yes, it's becoming a bit crazy out there, the sort of thinking. I'm struggling with my health on the diet, and I've only gotten me so far. I need to do tests, but yeah, okay. And working with the GP is a nightmare. Look, I know the experience I went through, that sort of rigmarole myself, going back and forward, and not knowing, them doing tests and saying, there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm going, are you serious? There's nothing wrong with me? So it's like the long COVID sort of stuff that people are talking about now. And, I'm sort of thinking, we've done a whole lot of contraindicated experimental stuff to ourselves. Plus, there's something about the spike load and spike relationship and all that's a bit of an issue, seems to. The other thing is, it seems to, unlike the flu, unlike many other viruses, it seems to also reactivate a whole lot of other stuff in our system. That's a bit of a concern, getting the reactivation. I mean, the most you'd get, let's say, herpes would be, and you'd get a bit of an outbreak around your mouth. Is probably the only thing you'd probably get from a cold sore or from the flu or stuff like that. But when it comes to C19, we've been getting reactivation of all sorts of things, So, and we know that, we're not claiming anything about the labs or anything like that, but there's a lot of strangeness around the whole issue. Let's just leave it at that without upsetting the YouTubia people. And so, I've shifted towards a hypothesis of mine that we're seeing reactivation potentially in these long COVID people of actual viruses, that because viruses do actually attack bacteria. They do infect bacteria and they do attack them. And so my hypothesis has been that potentially reactivation of some stealthy viruses may be actually attacking the mitochondria, because your mitochondria are basically bacteria that hitched a ride with eukaryotic cells a very long time ago and became part of different types of animals, energy production systems, but they still are vulnerable to viral attacks. And also even the replication stuff, that machinery in the endoplasmic reticulum around the nucleus of your cell, that rough part, that also is compromised by C19. and these, replicating jabberoos. So, after 6 months, they were supposed to be eliminated out of the system in 3 weeks. They're still around. So potentially reactivating, potentially doing all sorts of things. Now, vitamin D to rebuild the immune system, your stem cell activation through your bone marrow, which is part of my protocol, plus, the to activate those naive T cells with taurine, plus to keep the immune system from going senescent, because aging and senescence of an immune system is what makes the people more vulnerable. It's what kills you in the end, what we call about the cytokine storm effect, but constantly reactivating and constantly attacking your immune system, which seems to what is happening with all this sort of stuff. But also I think that a lot of these people that are getting insomnia, getting a lot of this fibromyalgia type symptoms, sort of really weak and stuff like that. I don't know whether you're going through it, some of this sort of stuff. That also really comes back to people have actually had improvements with more protein, like even essential amino acids and stuff like that, supplementation, which I've had some experience with some people that I've dealt with. And that probably providing the machinery or the precursors to basically build more enzymes, build more machinery to help the immune system. But ultimately, I'm still looking for novel approaches how to deal with viral attacks against the mitochondria. So that's my sort of new area that I'm actually researching currently. I haven't spoken a lot about it, but it's an area that I'm sort of dwelling into it to try and find solutions, because I don't think this is getting any better. We're in the booster stage, and now they want to do a fourth booster, the fourth one, and all sorts of things, and a lot of new variants coming out. So I don't know whether this is sort of potentially, because a lot of people seem to, I've had a couple of carnivores that have basically been fine, and then a couple of years ago, or a year ago, or 6 months ago, they basically had things related to C19, and they've really gone downhill and really struggled to try and sort themselves out. And so this has been a bit my thinking that, something else is happening, or something else is in the mix that's not in the normal mix. So I don't know whether that could be your case as well, Ajax. We're in a very, unfortunately, there's no research. Nobody's researching these things. Nobody's looking into these things. It is annoying, because there's no literature that I can look at. I'm sort of pulling at straws, you could say, going down all sorts of rabbit holes, trying to get little bits of evidence, little bits of information to try and work out maybe a new protocol, some new adjustments, some new approaches. I'm still milling it through my head. I don't even know whether I've got it right or whether I'm on the right path anyway. So that is science. When you're looking at science, is a lot of dead ends, basically, a lot of dead ends, unfortunately, and a lot of mistakes and errors. And so, while I'm being cautious not to make them, I probably may end up making them, because that's the nature of science. What do they say? One funeral at a time. It progresses at a glacial stage, while people are holding on to their committed ideological positions. It's the way they work. And that's why, my sort of argument is, I hypothesize about a couple of things, and I do have like my hypothesis things that I put out there, but I do put them out as a hypothesis. I don't basically sit there, arguing that I'm right and everybody's wrong. In that regard, I could be wrong on certain things. Usually I'm not, and that's the only reason, because I do my friggin' research. And, unlike Rob that didn't do his properly, and has gone down a reductionist road like a lot of others, like the guy down at Costa Rica has gone down the same road, and it's the repeat road, unfortunately. But, this is the situation so I hope you don't go down that road looking for answers, because you'll only be masking some problems, but you won't be solving those problems. Anyway, let's move on. Raymond, good to see you, mate. Yeah. Pim's pretty good as well. Yeah, Pim, Bart, and also Mary Ruddock. they do deal with people with a lot of sort of issues with coaching and stuff like that, but also the Steak and Butter Gang as well. They could also help as well, the different people that are involved in that. So there's a number of people out there. I think I actually saw, what's that one's of Tracy's further down here. Okay, that's the Rivero one. So that's another option, the Rivero one. There's a number of different things to look at. Yeah. Anyway, I do believe they do some online stuff as well. So there is options. If you're trying to get tests, I know the person who can actually do quite a lot of tests and even international tests, and that's Mary Ruddock. She does have that capacity. So, but I don't know whether she's actually on, whether she's still in South America doing research at the moment. That's the only thing I'm not sure where she's at. I haven't contacted her, so I don't know what exactly she's doing at the moment. So yeah. Yeah, but you probably want some physician, maybe even contact. If you go to Paul Mason's YouTube site, he's got contact details, or even leave him a message and ask him whether he knows a physician in Melbourne. That would be the easiest way, Ajax. Just go to Paul Mason's YouTube channel and say, "Do you know? Hi, I'm Ajax, blah, 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 blah. Can you please point me to a physician, a carnivore physician in Melbourne?" And I suspect Paul Mason would give you the information, So I think he does have an email address on his YouTube channel. If he doesn't, contact Bart, because I know Bart definitely does have his contact details. So, that's an option. Then he could tell you whether there is a specific person that he would recommend in Victoria. So that's the other option. Tracy's up to scratch on these far more than I am. Thank you, Tracy. G'day, Deborah. Yep. Yeah, try those options. Try and see if you can contact Paul Mason. Yep. Oh, there. Yeah. Gary Fecky might be an option. He's in Tasmania, Gary Fecky, but Paul he gets around and he probably has a bigger network, so he would probably know physicians in Victoria. So, but you could try both. You got nothing to lose. That's good thinking, Raymond. Yeah, you'd have to contact him, mate. You'd have to contact him to find out. G'day, Lukey. Oh, okay, they're all low carb doctors and coaches in Victoria. Okay, good. Nathan, good to see you, mate. Oops, that was me. I shouldn't put that up. And there's the Rivero. Okay. Oh, okay. Rivero. Luxury car. Okay. Anyway, hi, Harry. I've heard about the product to repair your gut using B vitamins and Ruteri. Yep. Yeah, please. Yeah, that's right. That's correct. Yep. That's it's a 3-month thing. We don't want to go higher above 50 milligrams. The reason for that is pantothenic acid. I did a video. Unfortunately, Bart has actually scaled back his I don't know whether he's going to put it back, and I'll have to ask him for a copy of it to put it on my channel. I did a video with him on pantothenic acid and its storage. So a lot of my Bart playlists are basically stuffed because he's changed everything on his. So until he basically starts putting some of that stuff back, or where he's going to put it, I may have to do, I think it's on Odyssey, which is the other platform that he uses. That's where everything is, all his old content. And so that's the stuff he's actually, there's one there about pantothenic acid. If you want to look at it, it's an old study that I found that I basically did a bit of a chat with him on that specific. What it does is it does store it, and as a consequence, if you take in particular B complex for too long, you'll end up basically storing so much pantothenic acid, that's B5, and as a consequence, you can induce a sort of a mild, it depends on the person's genetics, a whole lot of things, insomnia. It affects the cells in the back part around the just above the area of the reptilian brain. I forget what they're called. So that's the sort of issue why we don't like. And they do exchange B vitamins. They do produce B vitamins, all the beneficial bacteria. So we like to use Rotary to suppress. We like to use taurine to re-regulate, and we like to use B vitamins to help, those beneficial gut microbiota actually proliferate as well. I do also recommend a couple of months of kefir as well, because that really helps in, specific bacterial strains that a lot of antibiotics tend to kill off. So I did actually pin in my community post a lady's way that she actually did kefir. Richard thought that it was basically very boring and all that, and he said I could do better than her. I'm still waiting on Richard. I'm still waiting on you, Richard. I did notice you're in the chat for something like that. Yeah, so basically it's a 3 month. It's 3 month at no more than 50 milligrams. There is a video somewhere where I do discuss. If you look at the playlist of the microbiome playlist or the gut one, it's one of the two, and it's in that. Off the top of my head, I can't remember which one it was. Oh, is he? Oh, yeah, he is as well, and his partner, his wife as well. They're both quite active on Twitter. You're right. Yes, that's right. I was getting, because when I sort of go on and off on Twitter. I'm not constantly on Twitter. That's right. Yeah, because I'm using my secondary account. I just realised, Tracy, I haven't linked Fecky's on my secondary account. I need to do that. My primary account, my Harry Serpanos one, got banned on Twitter for obvious reasons, because I was, supporting certain people like the truckies and stuff like that. They're just a bunch of, yes, it's looking like it's gonna, bit of a mess there with Elon initially wanting to buy it and now basically wanting to pull out, or whatever is going on. So if he does pull out, it's going to go back to what it was, a cesspool of censorship. So yeah, anyway, it's annoying, to say the least. G'day, Joseph. Yes, Bart does say that. Some, but none of us are ancestral. So, and Bart understands that some of us basically are damaged from a whole lot of a life of inappropriate stuff, and yeah, we got problems. So sometimes we need to do a few biohacks and a few modified things to sort things out, and transition protocols and all sorts of things. So some people can't go immediately to meat and water, and Bart would agree with me on that. He says to people, you need a transition period. So yes. G'day, Alberto. Hey, Harry. I'm a young boy, started Carnivore 3 months ago and was keto for a few months before. The whole time I have experienced muscle twitching, leg weakness, diarrhea, and sometimes fatigue. Okay, there can be a lot of reasons for all this sort of stuff. There can be a gut microbiome issue. There can also be certain types of bacteria that either are missing or are in there and not being suppressed. and they can actually produce diarrhea. It may be an adjustment period for your enzymes to deal with the adjustment, because it's, you've gone too fast into it rather than slipping slowly into it by just reducing plants. There's a lot of things. You'd have to get a coach to go through these sort of things. Also with twitching and all that, that's like an electrolyte thing. Being previous keto, you probably already had some electrolyte issues that you weren't managing properly. More protein, and which will give you more taurine, because taurine is the osmolyte that regulates electrolytes. So eventually, if you get enough protein in your diet, and that's what you should be doing in a carnivore diet, in particular having a big bolus meal to basically push up the muscle protein synthesis, but also push you out of ketosis for a period of time, to basically, you should be swinging in and out of low grade, and you should be, more or less for about nearly a third of the day out of that ketotic state, and 2/3 of the time in that ketotic state when you're time restricted feeding and you're sleeping. And that other part, you should be basically building stuff in your body, whether it's muscular stuff, enzymes, or all sorts of things in your stuff to do things and fix things and repair things. So that's why you may need additional. I find that some people have been far too catabolic for too long, and whether they're coming from a veganerized diet or they've come from a very low protein keto diet, they may have lower, lean body mass plus muscle skeletal. Their skeletal part may also be weaker in some regards. And so there's a lot of things. Your gut is made of collagen. So if you're not getting enough, basically you can actually have permeability. You can actually have all sorts of gut problems related to insufficient protein. There's a lot of things that can actually cause a lot of these things. So it's not, you do need to get a coach. I got a day job. I don't do coaching. I do answer emails, but at the moment I've put a stop on that because I'm so far behind. So if you need immediate help, you will need to look at somebody to help you with that. Taurine supplementation is probably the best thing you can do to deal with it. All my subs are pretty much, because meat isn't freshly slaughtered like we used to. It's basically hung up for quite a long period of time. It loses a lot of its fluids. With the fluids goes the taurine. So the meat that you buy in the supermarket has much less taurine that naturally it would have. It was freshly slaughtered and given to you. So, which is just the unfortunate situation. So basically, a bit of supplemental taurine can actually fix that problem. You need to get in the free form. There is one on iHerb. If anybody would like to put a link out there, so it will save me having to do it, I'd appreciate that. Probably Lukey or anyone else. Yep, people who were in remission with cancer now dealing more aggressive forms. HT, g'day, mate. There's a lot of people dealing with all sorts of things. That's true. But I don't know what your question is. I've tried electrolytes upping. Nah. Salt, yes. The other stuff is not needed. You excrete 120 milligrams of magnesium and 192, this is on average, milligrams of potassium. So you don't need the thousands. You're actually, if you eat a big steak, you're already getting about 15 to 1700, depending on the steak, depending on, things like that. Plus the same thing, you'll get plenty of magnesium. And if you've basically got enough taurine in your system, you actually, at the kidney levels, you will recycle these things. And not only that, you'll also force them in your cells, because what it actually does, there is a certain, in order to maintain electroneutrality in the body, we don't want sparking, because that doesn't happen in the body. What it does is the body, if it's properly regulated, it will push the appropriate gradient of certain ions like magnesium, potassium, and stuff like that, and will keep others in the actual bloodstream, like sodium. And there's still going to be some sodium because it's required in the cell as well and in the mitochondria. But that's why that's another problem. Sometimes people not getting enough salt can cause issues. But it really is that people are not managing their regulation. It's usually due to not eating enough protein. It's usually the problem. That means they're not getting enough of the taurine to regulate, which is an osmolytic regulator of the fluids and ions within those fluids inside the cell and inside the bloodstream. That's its purpose. It's an ancient molecule, sulfonic acid, that does that. And it does a great job. But when you eat enough meat, you get it. When you don't eat enough meat, and you, especially on a ketotic diet, you tend to have electrolyte issues. It's a very unnatural way of living, being very catabolic like that. People on a SAD diet and a veganerized diet get away with some of this sort of stuff is because they raise their insulin by eating a lot of carbs, and they tend to hold on to more of these ions and fluids as well, which basically tends to give them higher blood pressure and a whole lot of other issues, health issues, but they have less electrolyte issues. But they still get cramping and stuff like that because their diet is deficient in some regards. So there's a whole lot of reasons for all this. But most of my subs that basically jump on the taurine bandwagon and take a couple of grams, they realize all those cramps have gone away. A bit of salt, sun salt and meat is our motto here on this channel, and a bit of taurine as well, which basically taurine is if you eat enough meat, you should get enough taurine, especially if it's fresh. As I said, it's the food supply system that basically sometimes doesn't give us exactly what we should be getting from the actual foods that we're consuming. And that's a different issue in itself. Anyway. Yeah, so try supplemental taurine. If somebody has already put that in. Still, nobody's put the taurine thing in there. Can somebody please put the taurine link inside the chat? I would really appreciate that. Anyway, are you still covering the 2 pokes of supernova, Harry? Got to be careful nowadays. We've got to be careful about these things. Yes. Yes, there's a lot of nonsense out there, Tracy. You know how it is. Oh, do I have to sing again for you, Tracy? Taurine, Taurine, Taurine. By Waxed. Richard will always come with the one-liners. Yeah, he's a kinky mouse. Yeah, we know that. Smooth. Oh, God. Not a problem. G'day, mate. Good to see you as well. Volatility. Ah, yes. Nothing like a bit of volatility. Thanks, Richard. Yep, that's the... And don't worry if you hit on that, whatever your countries, like it's got NZ, it's got AU in for Australia, iHerb, whatever country you're in, it'll actually automatically revert to your country's sort of extension. So, don't worry too much about that. Anything in this lot. Yeah, exactly. We can't talk about this sort of stuff, Tracy. Do you want the YouTubia censor board coming down on me like a ton of bricks? But thank you for putting that in there. And what I'll do is I'll add it to the community page later on for people to be able to look at. Yes. Yes, it's all coming out about, yes, their experiments were dodgy as, yeah. We know. They basically ran them themselves. They ran them themselves. They fixed them themselves. They made sure that they got the exact stuff that they wanted, you know. I can't say they fabricated the information, but let's say they massaged the information. I can definitely can say that without getting into trouble. Yeah. So yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, yes. It's telling us something about theirs. Yes. Should we be doing this thing to younger children? I would say not. You know, it doesn't seem to really even benefit the high risk people in the older age bracket because they've already got a lot of immunosenescence. That their immune system is old, and the actual both the Jabiru and the C19 itself seems to age the immune system a bit faster than other ailments or viruses or things. So yeah, wouldn't it be better to actually approach things from a more a way that actually helps improve the immune system, like getting out in the sun like people used to. They used to wheel them out of the hospitals into sun areas or sun rooms or whatever. And they used to, considering I better have it always goes cold. My first break. Yes. So it's, a bit unfortunate what's happening for the world in general. Well, it's disgraceful, really, to be quite honest. I'm quite pissed off about it that a lot of young people are being put at risk. So these arse can actually make money off their suffering. Yes. And then we've got the Vagoons that are promoting this sort of bullshit, and they will tell you, "Oh, the poor little suffering animals." What? Even a animal in a feedlot is actually happier than a demented Vagoon. It's content. I mean, just think of it. If you're out in the plains in a savanna environment with a whole lot of cats around wanting to rip you to pieces, you get together with all your mates and try to, you're basically looking around and going, you're under stress, where's the next predator? But if you're in a feedlot, comfortable, warm, you know, undercover, no rain in many cases, or in a barn with heaps of food in front of you, it's like paradise for these animals. I mean, what's suffering? You know, what and even the final part of they don't get ripped apart alive. They get knocked off and basically slaughtered. Yes, a really weird one. Yes, but when it comes to these little kitties and stuff like that are basically being jabberooed and being put at risk. No, God, no. Yes, who cares about their suffering? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Look, so you've been listening to that Costa Rican fellow. Yes. If you go to my right at the bottom, I've got on the main page. There's I think it's 2/3 of the way down. The featured. there's like a featured row. And if you go through the featured channels, you will find Mary Ruddock's channel, and then you can go to Mary and actually find her email under her about page on her channel. So yeah, he is. Yep, he definitely is. He does telehealth, does he? Oh, he actually does telehealth. I didn't realize that. Okay, it's good to know. Listening while lifting weights, not shirtless. Carbs are bullshit. Oh, you'll upset your mate down in Costa Rica, and Rob as well. Apparently nowadays. Okay, they're mushrooming all over the place. It's good to know. Good to know these people. Well, seems like Tracy knows more about these people than I do. Okay, Centre for Gastrointestinal Health. Okay, so that's where this guy is. Thank you very much, Tracy, for putting all that stuff up, because that's really going to be helpful for people that want to basically contact these people. Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah. If only basically we've got the Murray-Darling basement on the other side, most of it on the other side of the Blue Mountains in Australia. If we only basically, listen to those old statesmen in the past and engineers who basically wanted to build a lot of piping, some of that water into the Murray-Darling basement from the east coast, which has much higher precipitation, we would basically really have transformed the west part of the Murray-Darling basement or of the Blue Mountains. No, we can't do that, can we? Let alone where our mountains are too low. They're about 2,200. They're not very tall. And so what happens is they can't actually produce enough water to support the Murray-Darling. You get less basically glacial sort of stuff. Then on top of that, because of the weather patterns in the Tropic of, I think it's trying to think, Capricorn, something to do with that, the actual interplay between those trade winds, and it actually affects the way rainfall happens in Australia. So we get far too much on the west coast, on the east coast, all the way down. So that's why we get all these floods. It's been known for many, many moons. Why aren't governments actually investing at least $2.5 billion per annum for the next 10 years to rebuild massive piping from these vulnerable areas and sort this problem out once and for all? No, we can't do that, because it'll upset a whole lot of, who. They're very green, these people. Oh, thanks. Appreciate it. We do need the Kiefer video. You did promise me a Kiefer video. I thought I'd hold you to it. You're welcome, mate. I've been Carnivore for about 6 months now and still having loose stools, hoping that the gut repair protocol might regulate this. It's one factor. There's a lot of different factors. Some people basically, Necro Kitty had this problem. She had a lot of problems. She was having diarrhea for about 2 years. She eventually did the protocol and all that and fixed the diarrhea, but then she got constipated because she was missing a lot of the some of the bifidobacteria and a lot of the the sort of lactobacillus types. And without those, you can end up, once you suppress the pathogenic ones, you can end up with a bit of constipation. So she was able to resolve that by doing kefir and restoring some of those important microbiome players, which is the bifidobacteria ones, and also the ruteri ones. I think some naturopaths said, now I don't have any data, but there's sort of the naturopaths out there are saying in America, North America, that something like about 90% of the American population, based on their stool samples that, the companies that actually do like microbiome tests on the population that doctors send to them, they've actually found that Bifidobacteria infantis and Bifidobacteria reuteri in particular, both those, rhamnosus slightly less, but it does help. They tend to suppress the pathogenics. And so when you re-regulate the gut microbiome with taurine, you end up with some of these in a more dominant position, which is really important because that's what sort of keeps the gut microbiome in a stable state. It keeps it keeps spermidine down, and it also keeps histamine down in the gut, which is really important. I've done a video on and how taurine plays a big role in that through inflammasome. So I've actually, if you check the microbiome metabolite that plays a role, I sort of cover that in there. So it's sort of a combination of these things. This is why I'm saying that, I mean, even if you take a look at, ancestral people, they did have, fermented type meats and stuff like that. Even the Inuit will throw in all these sort of fermented stuff, like they'll throw in parts of fish and they'll let it ferment and actually create a sort of a probiotic type thing. Also, because in the acid, the lactobacillus and all that are acid loving. So they tend to basically, in things that become sour, like even traditionally people used to create pickled, onions, pickled cucumbers and all that. Again, I mean, my father still gherkins and stuff like that, still for the same reason, that it basically provides that sort of stuff, because we were sort of scavenger carnivores, and so we need those sort of things. Thanks, Richard. Which is sort of really, really important as well, that sometimes we neglect. I mean, some people don't want to do that sort of stuff, and they go, oh well, I'll get it from certain cheeses that are raw cheeses that have got certain bacterial strains. Yep, you can get that. When you do come out of your mother's birth canal, you do get coated with these, in particular the lactobacillus, but they are very vulnerable to antibiotics or low-grade antibiotic mimicking molecules like glyphosate, which is in all the plants that most people have been consuming now for the last couple of decades. I think the big rise in switching from a 2/3 animal-based diet before refrigeration to a 1/3 animal-based diet and 2/3 plant-based diet that the majority of the population does out there and has been doing for a long time, is actually bringing in these compounds, the glyphosate and stuff like that, which has been registered. Monsanto's registered it as an antibiotic compound. It's in the patent office of the US and many other countries. So it's not me saying it. It's actually Monsanto's themselves registering it, and to protect their intellectual properties, that it has those effects. So basically, when you're eating a lot of the plants that you get in the supermarkets, you're basically giving yourself on a daily basis a low-grade antibiotic nearly. And then people wonder why 90% of some of these important strains are missing. So people are across the board, whatever diet they're on, they're having gut issues. This is not, specific to one community or one group. It's right across. Generally, our species appropriate diet is a superior diet, but it's not going to mitigate a lot of damage that's actually we've done for many years on inappropriate diets and eating certain foods and the way they're processed as well. There's all those factors, and it's creating a lot of these issues. Yes. Anyway, now I better acknowledge my two big fans. Thanks, Richard. Yes, yes. Having a day job really does restrict how much you can do. It's just a reality of the situation. But I do appreciate any little gifts. Thanks a lot. Did you get my email, Harry? You said I should email. I did. LOL. Not rush reply, but just confirm. Yeah, I did. I do believe I did. I do believe I did. I'm really behind. I mean, that's why I asked people to stop emailing, because I'm so behind on my emails. It's not a joke. I'm months behind. I've just got so many. So I'm going slowly through them. And you know, I'm a detailed person. If I'm going to recommend anything to people, I need to be precise and all that. And I need to go to the earlier people as well, because that's, otherwise it's not fair on them. If they've sent me very early, 2 months ago, and they're still waiting. So yeah, I'm slowly getting through them. I've had a few other things that have happened in my life recently. So things that have sort of dragged me here and there. Mira recently had a motorbike accident as well, so she's not feeling great. So there's a number of things that are happening in my life that have sort of family-wise and other people and things like that have dragged me away. It's another reason why you haven't seen a lot of content recently. It's only been just very recently that I've sort of got back on the horse, so to speak, of producing a bit of content. So yeah, yes, I will be back on that, and slowly but surely I will get to you as well. Please be patient with me. There's just so much damn stuff to do and so many things to deal with, as you can understand. Maybe. Yep. And that other one, which you're talking about, Tasmania, basically the floods down here and the seeding and stuff like that. Yeah. I do know some people that are in actually the hydro Tasmania, stuff like that. If I do find anything out, what exactly happened, because I don't really know unless I speak to those people. So I may even ask my next door neighbour. He's basically works for one of those companies that are associated with, it's Transend, but so I may actually ask him whether he's heard anything as well. But yeah, yes, and that's the other thing as well. Oxalate dumping, Nathan. Yeah, that's the other thing that sometimes can be an issue. Citric acid can sort that out. Lemon juice, if you don't like the taste of citric acid, or something like vinegar as well. So you can actually use those as sort of options. So yeah, thanks, Tracy. Do you think organic Greek yogurt is helpful or detrimental? It depends. If you've got bacterial overgrowth, it can be problematic. Obviously, if you've got taurine, then you've got proper, cleansing of the proper bile flow. The big thing is bile flow. I mean, you can take as much taurine as you like, and it's not going to fix a problem where you've got overgrowth. It will over time, don't get me wrong, because it does actually improve the functioning of the gallbladder. It does improve the functioning of the stomach. It does improve the general functioning of the gut, the digestive tract itself. But in those initial stages, it may not be a good idea until SIBO's under control. But once it's actually sorted, then it's fine. It's actually sort of indicated, especially if you've had a life of antibiotics, to get some of the lactobacillus back. I also recommend that people use, some people don't like kefir. I understand why they don't like. And then I say, well, there's another option. You can actually get, these different types of, good quality, sort of a number of important strains like the Reuteri strains, Rhamnosus and all that, and actually incorporate those into the yogurt and actually make it a sort of even a more powerful probiotic in that regard to get some of those. And the good thing about it, especially the Reuteri one, what it does is it actually helps with the cleansing, both the Bifido infantis and the Reuteri cleansing the small intestine, which is important because that actually prevents SIBO. It actually reduces a lot of the bacterial load within the small intestine. So that's how it works in combination with taurine, which basically with an animal-based diet. And usually these, if you look, animal-based foods are the sources of a lot of these lactobacillus bifidobacteria. I did actually, if you take a look at my myths and falsehoods of veganism, there's actually one there of the gut, which covers how bifidobacteria actually increases, and basically firmicutes comes back to the normalized rate, which is what actually plants increase and actually increase a number of the inflammatory interleukins in the gut. So another reason why some people on a keto diet with a more plant-based keto diet tend to get a lot of gut issues as well, like the vegans, sometimes even more than the sad dieters who are eating more refined stuff and less of this contraindicated green stuff. So but the yogurts, look, the commercial yogurts, the biggest problem that I've got with commercial yogurts, with all commercial yogurts, they have some of the acidophilus strands that they use. I probably should do a video at some stage on this, which ones there are, but it's sometimes harder because they give you a general name. They don't tell you what strains, because remember, you've got the family, you've got you've got the general grouping, which is like, whether it's the general grouping, which is of a certain bacterial family. And then you've got the strains, specific strains, a bit like viruses, the way they've got, different mutations and different types. Well, it's the same thing. And they've got numbers, like, the Reuteri one there is, I can't remember the exact number. It's something like, DSM, I think it's 17.9 something, whatever. And those sort of things are the sort of things that are in there, and those numbers determine how it's going to play in the body. So some type of acidophilus can be very beneficial and also suppress pathogenic bacteria. Some can be neutral, and some can actually even be pathogenic. And not only that, but also are hoggers for sugar, like say, give me more sugar. And so they tend to basically make you increase your appetite or wanting to eat more. Now, obviously, for a company that wants you to eat more of their product, there's sort of an incentive to add those strains into the yogurt in order to get you to eat more of the yogurt, if you know what I mean, the commercial thinking behind it. This is the problem with a lot of our food industry, unfortunately. So You got to get quality or make your own. My father still makes some of his own yogurt, if you believe, and cheese. He hasn't done it recently, but he used to do quite a bit in the past. So yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, look, I do get one of their yogurts as well, the Greek, and you know what? I actually put my own stuff in that can suppress the other stuff, and actually, yeah, I do that sort of stuff. So, but I have actually, on occasions, motivated myself. I can, with a lot of things that I've got on my plate, sometimes be a bit lazy and say, "Oh, bugger it, I'll just buy it and just throw in the supplements." Yeah, but sometimes I think it's possibly worthwhile doing something like that in that regard, making your own. Yeah. Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate it, mate. Yeah, so I know that Kitty, when she did the same thing, and she's normalized her stuff by doing a lot of her own kefirs with a number of these bacterial strains. So I know they come in pills and stuff like that, and you can actually crush them. G'day, Sammy. You can crush them and make them into a little, and combine them into your kefir. So that's another way of actually doing things. Well, that's how me and my brothers have basically been, just creating kefir and then adding the ruteri in it by crushing it into a powder and just including it into the kefir itself. So we end up creating a ruteri kefir with some of the other strains, and we can actually mix and match whatever stuff we want and make a really more higher potent superfood type thing, which is really important when you're trying to get back after years of glyphosate, after years of antibiotics, trying to get back very important bacterial strains that you would have got traditionally from our mothers as we came out the birth canal, and we would have had those strains for all our life. So it's unfortunate that the way things have become now, that we've lost a lot of that biological diversity. And when you lose biological diversity in the stomach, you actually increase inflammation. And there's some research that shows that biological diversity, centenarians tend to have higher biological diversity. Now, it is an association, but it actually does indicate that, if you've got gut inflammation, it's not going to be a good longevity thing. Let's put it that way. So we need to address it. We just can't ignore it. What do you recommend carnivore to everyone if many ancestral diets had carbs all year round, especially in warmer climates? Well, they didn't actually have all year round, Jason. People's basically, that's more recent times. For the majority of our existence as a species, and there is N15 data to back what I'm saying, actual real data, not anecdotes or people's opinions, because people have opinions. So that's fair enough. They can have their opinions on anything. But we've only had 3 very warm interglacial periods for the Homo sapiens sapien. So that was about 200,000 years ago. Our species has sort of existed for 350,000 years, more or less, based on the most recent archaeological evidence. And about 200,000 years, we were in around that period in a short interglacial period, which was warmer. Most of the other periods has been glacial, and there's been frost all the way down to the tropics. So not many plants around under those conditions. So the majority of our existence, we've existed on a planet with very little access to plants, not even seasonal for the majority of our time. We had an interglacial period that actually changed our ApoE phenotype. That's how we know that it's associated. It was a protective mechanism to reduce chylomicron uptake. And I've done a video. If you go under Pim Johnson I actually cover the ApoE thoroughly right through, and I'm not going to cover it here because that's a long video. You can go through and actually understand it. But basically, it actually slowed down the uptake of remnant chylomicron in order to not cause, sort of Randall cycle inflammation type in the actual liver. So when you're consuming a very small amount of carbohydrate, which would have been in that interglacial period. After that, it was around, the next one was about 80 odd thousand years, and that's when we shifted to the ApoE22 as proportion of the population. It's become more pronounced in certain populations that have been grain eating populations. Again, it shows that mixing fat and carbs together is not a good thing. It's contraindicated, and the body there had to be some genetic adaptations to those interglacial periods of very small amounts of intake. So our high amounts of intake nowadays are very contraindicated and not a good thing. And now we're in another interglacial period, which is slightly warmer. And as a consequence, and we know it's slightly warmer because we got more flooding back around quite a few thousand years, about 10, 12,000 years ago, when a lot of the actual weather changed on the planet. And that's when we actually got 2 seasons in the tropics, in terms of food, in terms of carbs, 2 seasons, and 1 season in the more temperate type climates, which is about towards the end of the year and all that. Most plants are seasonal, very little, and most modern day plants that we consume today didn't even exist in the past. More than 90% are basically all man-made since agriculture. They didn't exist, basically. If you go back and look, even, broccoli, which is a big thing, the flower, it's, a little plant which looks like a parsley. Very different, radically different. So the only things that we had access was things like little berry type things. That was it. We took these little berry type things and made them into big fruit like that. They did not exist. Watermelon in Africa is a little thing like that, very fibrous. It's got more water. It's more used as a water source rather than a fruit. It's a fruit, but it's more fibrous with a lot of water in it, and people use it as a water source. But it wasn't used basically as a fruit. So all this nonsense that people talk about, that we had carbs, our ancestors and all that, no. These were basically, man-made, the modern stuff that we've got. None of it's actually, if you look at the ones in and most of it is dangerous and very poisonous, will kill you, So we had to learn through agriculture how to handle it, how to, modify it. Like some of them have got very high levels of, certain types of like cyanide and stuff like that. And we had to learn through agriculture to modify like some of these tubers to get rid of a lot of this excess cyanide and a lot of these other things that would make you sick. So it's through agriculture that we're able to modify these things and then make them available to us. Prior to that, which is prior to, if we start agriculture, you're looking at basically about 5,005, probably, no, let's go right back to the very early stages. You're probably looking at about 11 plus thousand years ago, which is a blink, which is nothing in the evolutionary time span. But actual tillage, that means the ability to till and actually shift more of the diet towards agricultural products or grains and stuff like that, happened about 5,500 years ago, 3,500 BC. So that's in the sort of the fertile plain, as it was called. So basically, no, it hasn't been the case at all. And even in the tropics, it's basically seasonal, and it would been these little small berries that don't have a lot of sugar in them and all that. I've actually eaten, like in Indonesia, I've actually eaten sort of wild type varieties, compared to the actual stuff that farmers produce, but the actual wild stuff. And I can say the tart, they don't have a lot of sweetness to them, and they don't have a lot of sugar to them. They're very tart, and people don't like them. But and if you take a look at the early apples as well, small and tart, not very sweet. So, and they were seasonal, one season or 2 seasons in the tropics. So you didn't have a lot of access. That's the reality. So you've got to get your mindset away from this modern food supply. That's not what existed back then. You have to go and look at the history of plants. Then you'll realize that you've been bullshitted big time. But one thing that we know, animals, on the other hand, have been around for a very long time. G'day, Lukey.
Hello, Harry. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, so it's just bullshit, mate. The N15 is quite, in the interglacial periods, the lowest level in the tropics, which we find with the collagen long bones, which are not well preserved, unfortunately, because of the tropical environment, but the amount that we find, the small amount, they show levels of 70 to 80% coming from animal foods. That's where you're getting more plants because you've got more access to 2 seasons. And on the other hand, I mean, if you go into the temperate areas, it sort of drops all the way down to, 80 to 90. And the further north you go, it goes up to 100% nearly. And this is basically through the majority of time. And a lot of this sort of stuff is well worked out. We know that even the type of protein and where it's coming from, not even what animal it's coming from, because we look at the delta 13 carbon isotope, which indicates that it comes from a grass. Now, when you've got very low N14, which is the nitrogen in plants, and you've got high N15 and high delta 13 carbon, it indicates that it can only come from a ruminant that it was eating grass. So that's the dominant food that we actually consumed, whether it was a mammoth or whatever it was. It was a terrestrial large animal of one sort or another that we were consuming most of the time. And, and those warmer patches, our levels would drop down, would be down to 70%. And because animals are leaner, when you're in the interglacial periods, and in those interglacial periods, you become super carnivore, which is sort of 70+%, is called a super carnivore. And that's why we use the term super carnivore and hyper carnivore. Super carnivore is much lower. Hyper carnivore is 90 to 100%, but that's in the more glacial periods, which is the majority of time. And that's the important part here, the distinguishing point. And if you've got a big damn mammoth you bring down and you can feast on that, why would you waste a lot of energy trying to find some little bits of plants? Even Mary that went out with the actual Mary runner with the Hadza, when she was going, and they get some. The only stuff that they actually get is some seasonal tubers and some seasonal fruit, and that's it. They don't bother with any of the other plants. And for the obvious reasons, and a bit of seasonal honey. And the only reason they do that is because they're actually, without realizing, because animals now are leaner in these warmer interglacial periods. So you don't get as much fat as you would have got from a mammoth back then. You're getting you're not getting the 2-to-1 ratio. You're getting the 1-to-1 ratio or slightly less sometimes. And so in order to basically maintain fat stores, which is really important for humans, that's why we are who we are. We've got massive big fat stores compared to other animals. It allows us to basically extend our range, which is really important as a species. So we need to basically look at how we're adjusting now by engaging the Randall cycle in those seasonal periods. We're able to increase our adiposity through the Randall cycle and become slightly fatter and actually have that in the leaner periods. That's how it works nowadays in these interglacial periods. Back then, you had, because it was very cold, you had animals which had more adiposity to keep warm. And that was great for us because we had more energy to access from those animals. So we didn't have to waste time collecting things. Why would you? When you can bring down an animal and you just gorge on it. And gorge on it for days. And that's why our gut acidity is so low, so we can handle the bacteria that will actually grow into that stuff, because it'll actually ferment over a couple of days as you're eating the mammoth. Anyway, and as I said, the N15 data is quite firm on that and clear. That's my foundation, actually, to be honest. So it is my foundation. The rest of it's just propaganda and studies that basically anybody can do, statistical gymnastics and fabricated adjustments, as we know. So Harry, have you heard of anyone reporting a sort of leaky feeling in the head? I had something like this going on and off for 15 years. I think it may be some sort of mast cell response. When it comes to mast cell response and histamine type things, the best thing you can be is on a carnivore diet, because it gives you taurine, and taurine tends to bring down, reduce mast cell activation, both in the gut but in other parts of the body as well. So, really a species appropriate diet. And I think that's where a lot of people like Amber O'Hearn and stuff like that, she tends to eat her meat a bit more raw, or less cooked and stuff like that, so she'll end up getting more taurine. And I think that's where she got the bipolar and other things improved radically, compared to some other carnivores who said, I've done something similar. And then I usually ask them, how much do you cook your meat? And then then they go, oh, usually all the way through, well done. I go, well, yeah, you're probably losing a lot of the fluids and you're probably losing a lot of the taurine, and that's why you're not getting the same benefit as she's getting.
I'm glad my mom doesn't watch these streams and she doesn't understand English, because I've become such a raw person lately that I cannot even believe anymore. I'm even eating I'm having parties and it's basically a crust on the outside and it's like raw meats on the inside, and it's I no longer fear it anymore.
Yeah, look, people just fear things far too much, which is, what's my threshold taking aminos like taurine, creatine, L-citrulline, pre-workout without? Actually, I think somebody else actually asked me this. Harry, didn't you actually recommend that you should only consume every day 3 grams of taurine, no more? Well, I did say around 3 or 4 grams, and the reason for that was that there is a proportion of the population, due to methylation, which is the prime methylation pathway, genetic pathway, the 677, which tend to basically have some derangements in sulfur metabolism sometimes. And there are other people that also have both that, which I have, and also have the choline type issue as well. And they can't methylate or, manage properly within their body sulfur in some regards. Now, I'm a person that's got both those genetics. Okay. And I'm a person that basically did high levels of taurine without getting into the side effects. Now, how did he bloody do that? Well, he did that by basically taking high doses of choline to basically methylate that stuff and support the second pathway. That's pretty much it. Most other people don't need to bother about that, because you get more than enough from the carnivore diet and also the precursors that can be enzymatically produced in your body. It's just people with my genetics that tend to be a bit more vulnerable in that regard. We tend to be a much smaller crowd. Now, the MTHFR is a slightly bigger crowd, but they would have to do like mega doses, like 10 grams every day for a number of years before they got to that level where they created some sort of issue. So most people, I usually say, how much would you get in the diet normally? And you go, well, probably max 3 to 4. I'd say, well, then 2 to 4 would probably be where you want to be for most when it comes to taurine. Sometimes splitting it, you know. If you're basically going to be doing like it's a day that you're actually doing exercise and stuff like that, 90 minutes before, and I would do 2 grams then. So I wouldn't do any in the morning, and I'd do 2 grams before, 90 minutes before my workout to allow it to basically circulate within and get, sort of diffuse through many parts of my tissue, my body's tissue. So that's why I usually recommend that. Creatine, probably a bit, half an hour earlier is fine. L-citrulline, the same thing. It depends on a couple of grams of creatine is fine. Sometimes people like to do a couple of weeks of creatine loading. I've done that in the past, like taking 5 grams and doing a loading for about a month will get your creatine levels really sky high. Depends what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve, and how much you want to basically have the capacity to do sort of longer periods. L-citrulline also enhances that longer period, not only creatine, but if you notice that most people, when they combine L-citrulline, they get even a bigger boost. They can actually manage even a longer period. The reason why I like taurine is because taurine at the same time, while it doesn't actually act like an antioxidant, even though it regulates the antioxidant system. So it's a bit different, the concept. Because if you look at the literature, a lot of it describes it in some way like it's an antioxidant. But actually, when you look at the actual enzymatic pathways, you realize, actually, it's not acting like an antioxidant. It's not an electron donor. So, stop calling it an antioxidant, because it's not. What it is a regulator of the intracellular antioxidant system. So that's a different thing altogether. So it actually improves that. That's why you don't get the problems, because a lot of people are concerned, if I take, more taurine, like, I'll only take 1 gram. But, if you want to get the amplification of leucine and reduce myostatin, you really need to at least take 2 grams before a work. 1 gram's not going to do it. You really need to go up to 2 grams. So because, if you're a big bloke, I'd say, go up to 4 before a good workout, because what we really want to do is we want to bring down myostatin. Once you go over beyond that, there's no benefit. Don't waste your time. So you want to get slightly benefit and then magnify the leucine effect, so you can actually really get that stronger effect. It's the reason why I've been saying, if you've got elderly people that don't like to eat a lot of protein, give them a leucine and taurine supplement to sort them out, to basically, one, because it's a protein transporter, so brings in transporter, actually works with bringing in more aminos pool, which is good. And on the other hand, with leucine, then you can amplify the sort of the protein synthesis. And I've done that. You've seen the video, even in a fasted state. That's my sort of proof that it's not the signaling of insulin, but it's the actual leucine itself that's directly involved in the muscle protein synthesis. And that also for bone as well, because it's mineralized collagen, let's not forget. And leucine as an isolate form. Yeah, you can use it. I don't bother with leucine. I just give it to my old man, and I also give it to encourage older people. It's because they don't eat enough protein. That's the thing. I get more than enough protein. I get shitloads in my diet of leucine, so I don't need to supplement. It's a waste of money. But if you're basically not consuming enough protein, then definitely. And older people that may be in your family that, that they're not going to eat, they're stubborn, they will not eat more meat, then I do encourage both a combo of taurine and all that, but you always need to look at the side effects with older people and blood pressure meds and lithium in particular. But there are some other meds that can slightly, that's why you have to slightly start from 1 or 2 grams and then sort of move up. And sort of therapeutic levels are from 5 to above the therapeutic levels. And they have to deal with if you've got oxalate dumping that actually depletes sulfur in your body. You need more sulfur amino acids as a consequence. That's where the carnivore diet also helps, because it does have methionine, which is another key sulfur amino acid in the system with glycine and all that. And those sort of things come in with the diet, so you get these additional benefits, so to say, in the system. But I'd say to people that if you're getting enough meat, don't bother volatility. But if you're not, and you're older and for whatever reason you're having difficulties, then yeah, that is always an option as well. Freshly slaughtered lamb yesterday. Sounds great with my Lebanese family. Broadly fantastic it was. Sounds good. Oh yeah, that's right, Eid. Yes, I did notice quite a few people out today because of the Eid as well, shopping early for food and stuff like that. Anyway, yes, happy Eid to you as well, Nax. Yeah, that's the one. We'll put it up there just to remind people what causes foamy urine, other than protein, oxalate. That's what it causes. You've got a bit of an oxalate dumping problem, mate. You've got Alberta, you've got a bit of an oxalate dumping problem. Yeah, that's a giveaway. That's an easy one. So, yeah, I would say you definitely need to get some, whether it's, it depends what there is food grade citric acid you can buy. Some people can handle it, some people can't. I know I gave it to Hello Kitty. She hated it. And so she went back to lemons and other things like that, and apple cider vinegar and stuff like that to deal with the oxalates and stuff like that. But depends what you want to use. I mean, sometimes some people will just use lemon juice and consume that, or put it on their food and try to get as much citric, and that usually sorts out the issue. But you may have to do it for some time because it depends on the amount of dumping, and sort of go off, come back, go off, come back, and see what's happening. But that's usually a giveaway, and you definitely want to deal with that, because remember, oxalate dumping can be damaging to the kidneys and the bladder. And also, because you've got those other people that get it through, if you get like roughness at your anus, you get some roughness there, and you get a bit of pain. You're getting pain there and roughness and a bit of blood. That's oxalate dumping from the feces. So some people, probably genetics. Some people through the will dump that way. Some people will dump it through and get kidney stones like I do. I dump through my kidneys, and I ended up when I was eating a lot of green plants, ended up with, thanks Tracy, appreciate that. That's all the links, the Walmart ones, the Herb Pro, the Amazon ones for, yep. So there is a lot of different ones you can actually access. That taurine, and that's the one that I actually prefer. And it's specifically because it's in a free form. It's not bound to anything, and it's got no other fillers and crap like that, which I know some of the other ones can be a bit of an issue. Yes, it does. It does. It definitely does. Okay.
Yep, that was in the warning label for some of those.
Okay. Oh, really?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Really
Interesting.
gives you confidence.
Yeah, it really gives you damn confidence, doesn't it? Yeah, got to be careful what we say because after what happened to Bart. Yes, but I know. Yes, yes, definitely the Jabberoo thing isn't, oh, yes, after 3 weeks, there'll be no more problems. 6 months later, it's still basically replicating. Oh, and then the study finishes at 6 months. We don't know beyond that. Oh, it's not happening because we haven't checked. Oh, you don't want to check, basically. It's a bit like remember the statins? 7 years later, cancer in the LA veteran study. Then they said, oh, we don't want to check any further, just in case. It really shows that it causes this problem. So we can't claim that statins cause cancer because they're a mitochondrial poison, but we can only say that the LA veteran study showed a significant change in cancer incidences happening in that population that were taking statins. They were, everybody was more or less on a sad diet doing the same sort of stuff. The only difference between one group and the other is one was on statins and one wasn't for those 7 years. So, and none of the others markers, in terms of, the other causes of mortality and stuff like that, they were very similar. Cardiovascular, diabetes incidences, all these sort of things. Actually, diabetes did go up slightly, but it wasn't statistically significant. So it was, but we have seen other studies now that show that diabetes does increase in people taking statins over a decade or whatever. So we know it does happen. It does sort of derange a number of things the way they work in the body. So it's definitely a problem. But yeah, the cancer thing is a big one with statins. 7+ years, it's a big one, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest scandals in the future. So yeah, watch this space, so to speak. When I see foamy urine, unless somebody actually has severe atrophy and severe problems with their kidneys, they would know that anyway. They'd be on dialysis or whatever at this stage. Then yes, but anything with normal kidneys, yeah, immediately it's our dear friend oxalate. I mean, even about what was I about? I had something like 2.5 years of dumping, on off, on off. It wasn't pleasant, I can tell you. It wasn't bloody pleasant. So I know Bart had as well, and he actually gets it. He actually gets it through the feces, through the bowels and all that, and he had a lot of gut issues relating to it, where I had more kidney-related issues in my case, which, yeah, so hit us differently. But, yeah, oxalate dumping is definitely not. Anyway, I'll put your comment up there. Ivor Cummings has posted an excellent review with an expert on mass formation psychosis. Really puts the 2 years in perspective exactly. Well, a lot of our problems, our modern problems today, are due, Raymond, to that mass formation psychosis. That's what the problems are today. Our economy's been upended. If you take a look at Australia, we've got a population of about 26 million. The US has over 330 million. They printed in 2 years $11 trillion. Australia, which has a GDP of 7, I think now, trillion. It's quite high for a small population, 1.7. It's similar to some of the European countries that have got 60 million and whatever else. So Australia's not a poor country, in that regard. But it basically printed something well over $1 trillion. All this welfare. No wonder nobody wants to go back to work getting that sort of money. So this has created, forced the interest rates up, but also the interest rates would have gone up even if they didn't print this amount, because of the supply chain's in a mess, energy is in a mess, but it's all confounded together, and all this has actually created a big, massive problem in our world. It's just beyond a joke. Yeah, I will check it out when I get a chance. I was pretty good with some of that sort of stuff. I've been looking at a few other, like Peak Prosperity is another good bloke that I think Tracy may have actually mentioned it. I can't remember who actually mentioned. Somebody did, and I actually then checked him out, and I realised, he's not a carnivore, but he's basically does think along similar lines when it comes to health, the health industry, the economics. In particular, I found that in the economics, he actually viewed the world very similar to me. He actually saw that, like I say, that the production of goods and services are dependent on the energy potentiality in the system. Well, here's another one of those people that believes that energy is the foundation of any economy. And that's exactly it. If you go back, it was animal power. That's why you still use the word horsepower, because it was animal power that we used to determine our energy in our system and how much productivity we could actually, and what we could produce in terms of goods back then, because it was primarily goods. Service was minimal. The service sector was basically just distribution more than anything else of things. But going back to that subject, there are a number of people now that are starting to get it. This is why these people don't get it. They've got no solutions, because they don't even understand that it is, the industry didn't call, the dollar petrodollar. It called it a petrodollar because it basically was a petrodollar because all the energy that was actually being produced, which was coming primarily out of the Middle East, all those was actually being sold in dollars, and then that was all funneled through the Wall Street bankers. So it's our whole society's been built on cheap fossil fuels. That's why we had this massive economic development after the Second World War that actually happened globally. A whole modern world exists because of that, and now we want to tear it down. So how crazy is that? How bloody crazy. I can understand if they had an alternative other than windmills and solar farms, like thorium, nuclear power stations and stuff like that. I'd say, yep, because we are over peak oil in many countries, and it's much harder now to produce cheap fossil fuel energy as well. That's true. We're down to the sort of gas and fields and stuff like that, and a few other things, and shale. Some parts of the world have still got very economically exploitable, resources of that sort. But in the end, whether we like it or not, we have to transition to some extent. And it's not because of the climate nonsense that's out there, but it's more because out of necessity of peak oil. And we need more petrochemicals to be left alone, because there are still a lot of people, kibble eaters out there, that need to have something to eat. And without petrochemical inputs, most of modern agriculture would fall apart.
Like, I actually think that, at least from an industrial standpoint, I am a big chemical engineering nerd. It is actually what I graduated in. But I actually think it's a shame that people use petrochemicals for energy so much, because they are such a good chemical feedstock. It would be much better if we could use nuclear for energy, and then use the petrochemicals for feedstock only. So.
Precisely, yeah. It would actually bring down the cost, and actually make it far easier to support, provide. But it also, you could also always shift some of that production to animal the animal production as well.
Yep.
That's a choice that the society makes, obviously,
Yep.
in that regard, whether they use it more in feedlots to increase the productivity of animals, or they basically feed it to kibble eating, vegans or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
So either way, in that regard. But the problem is that, we're upending everything. We've gone crazy. We've massive death levels. We've gone crazy lockdowns for something that actually killed less people than the flu back in the 80s and 90s. It's just bloody crazy that what we've done. And that's official data. It's not me, Harry Serpanos. I've done a video on the UK stuff, and the UK actually is one of the few countries that actually has an independent authority, an authority that actually keeps very good documentation. Remember, they had an empire. They had to know how to actually keep very good documentation. So if there's one thing about the British you can rely on, they have very good documentation and good statistics, and their own statistics, their own official statistics show 2 years, well, nearly 2 years, bar one last quarter. So it's 1 year and three quarters, 17,403. Back in the 89-90 flu pandemic, 19,000, which is what they've had records for. And that's in the major cities, but in the rural areas and other areas like that, where there were more people in those sort of regions, the regional areas, there now most people have gone into the bigger cities. A lot of those which are smaller organizations that were holding the medical organizations, or councils or different things like that, a lot of that statistic was shredded, was thrown away. It's because it was just too costly. Once these communities shrink, because people go away, younger people leave and go to the bigger cities. Consequence of these smaller areas is they've got less population, less resources to maintain some of these records. They didn't digitize it to archive it, so they just got rid of it. So it's anywhere between 19,000 to 29,000. So there's a potential somewhere in there. It's still higher than C19. So please explain to me why we need to upend our whole economic system. Even after 1 year, they should have realized, okay, the numbers don't stack up based on older statistics. Let's do, these so-called epidemiologists, why didn't they do a comparison between 89, 90 and that first year, 2020? But they also had a meal ticket from the politicians, and their focus was more on their own bullshit than anything else. So what can one say? iNature, hello Harry, I've incorporated tuna and some pork for eczema. How long do you think it'll clear? Depends on a lot of factors. Even some of the gut microbiome issues can still, so you can actually have appropriate foods, like you can have to support, with additional arachidonic acid and DHA, you can actually have to support cellular healing and repair. But if you've got basically some inflammatory stuff happening in your gut that actually is not clearing out because of certain bacterial strains and all that, that can still be an issue. So it's the other thing that is really important with pork is it has niacin, and niacin also plays a bit of a role here with eczema as well, and also UV damage to your skin. So the other thing is also fat soluble vitamins to regulate. So as long as you're not, if you're getting a bit of, I usually say, sometimes it's hard for people to consume certain types of foods. So a bit more eggs, I would say, consuming a bit more eggs. If you can't eat eggs, which can be a problem, and you want to get your retinol up, then basically consume a bit of cream or some dairy stuff to be able to get some of that additional, because you need to regulate the matrix metalloproteinases that are being produced by your liver in response to the inflammation that's actually happening in your skin. It's basically these collagen degrading enzymes are having a field day on your skin, but they're being activated because of certain things, and probably not sufficiently regulated as well. So that's a sort of a multifaceted things that can be at play in that regard. So make sure your vitamin D status is good, your retinol intake is good. Don't worry about what the crackpots say. I still need to do that video, don't I? Anyway, so yeah, we're talking about 6, 7, 8, 9,000 IUs over multiple years. Not an issue. So without giving too much away on the video that is coming, now that I've actually had a bit of a chance, I had to do the Rob one. It sort of, when I heard somebody left me a comment and I first heard it, that really just rubbed me the wrong way. And I go, this is bullshit. This is more repeat stuff, where the retinol stuff is just old hat. So oh yeah, I'll get around to it, and then you guys will know. I mean, most of you understand anecdotally, you eat shitloads of eggs, you're getting retinol. Is it really doing anything? Yeah, exactly. Let's just be serious about this. Remember the guy that was actually having 25 eggs a day? Am I giving too much away? I mean, please, that's nearly 7,000 IUs. I mean, give us a break. It's nonsense.
Look at all those pastoralists like getting dairy fat and
precisely heaps and heaps and heaps. They're like the Messiah of retinol. But anyway, seal fat, shitloads. Fish has got quite a bit as well. I wonder what the Inuit really eat. And they've got high DHA foods, which basically don't allow them to clot very well. I suspect that has a lot of retinol as well. You know what I'm getting? I'm giving far too much away. I've nearly said the whole video.
Spoilers.
Anyway, spoilers. Far too many spoilers. Yeah, and that's how ridiculous it is. But anyway, we're not talking about here thousands, like 100,000, 150,000 I use. That's ridiculous. People that do that with retinol or with vitamin D or stuff like that are just asking for trouble. It's like, yeah, let me, it's there is a dose dependency on this sort of stuff. If you take like pantothenic acid, you can take shitloads, like a couple of grams rather than a couple of milligrams, which is similar sort of like high dose, extremely high dose. You do that, you won't be able to sleep after a month.
Yep.
You'll have such severe insomnia. I mean, but you still need pantothenic acid. If you don't get enough, you're going to have problems. But it's the excess, and it's I mean, it's all has to be nuanced. And this guy's gone from one extreme. He was giving all these clients high doses, causing them the problem, and then when he realized, he went to zero. Which was probably a good thing, because what it does, it'll bring down their storages and their amount and bring them back to normal at some point.
Yep.
But at some point, they'll go down too low, and then they'll have too much MMPs, matrix metalloproteinase activation throughout their whole body, and they'll have all sorts of new inflammation due to matrix metalloproteinase not being regulated by fat-soluble vitamins. So he'll create new problems. Well, he'll keep a lot of clients for a while. That's one thing. It's a good business model. Anyway. Yes, what can one say with some of this sort of stuff?
It seems that fear-mongering essential nutrients
it's
is
good
always
for money. Good for dosh. Good for dosh. Good for business. Looky, good for business. You're welcome. Thanks, Hector.
Oh, Harry, by the way, but I just have to congratulate you on that Rob video. It was so good. Like, I watched it earlier today, and it was just perfect. I was like, this is peak Harry right there.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate that. Yeah, look, it's the sort of thing when somebody states something and you show the inverse in even associative data. The moment you can show an inverse state where this doesn't happen, if something even can be inferred, it always must show an association. It's a bit like, cancer, lung cancer, and smoking. There's always an association. There's no inverse, nowhere in the literature. But With some things, there is an inverse. The moment there is an inverse, that means your hypothesis is busted. Absolutely zero. It has no basis in science. It's like somebody claiming, oh, such and such a law of nature works this way. Well, if you find one single case, that means the assumption that we already had is wrong. For some reason, we don't know why, but at some reason, then we have to really redo some of our numbers and redo some of our tests. But if you can't find one inverse relationship, then the inference is high that that's the most probable. Then you have to do experiments to actually validate it, to basically show a very strong experimental relationship, but that's a different kettle of fish. But Repeat says antibiotics are good. He would say that sort of nonsense. He would say, I bet he loves glyphosate as well. Send him a bag of glyphosate, Roundup, that is, as we call it in Australia. He'll love that. Tell him to put it in his coffee.
Yeah. Make like glyphosate ice cream or something.
Oh, exactly. Or glyphosate smoothie. It's great. Great for your gut microbiome.
Glyphosate. And raw carrots as well, because they love carrot for some reason.
Oh, that's right. Exactly. Throw in a couple of carrots. Yes. But if you do throw some carrots in, just don't give it to the bunnies. Due to the glyphosate. Adjusted, currency adjusted. Oh, that's why you get, okay. 17 currency adjusted. Oh, God. Yes. Pacific pesos, yes, as Bart calls them. New Zealand dollar. Oops. Did I miss something on the Discord?
What's that? It's a screenshot.
Tracy's got something for me. Anyway, save that. Put it on the screen. Share. Your table salt. His father probably and his father's probably an attack helicopter as well.
Yep. Don't be a helicophobe.
That's it. Exactly. Yep. Yes. We might as well just go out and, it's getting close to that stage. Like the Nazis burned all the books that they disagreed with. Yeah. Just take out all the biology books and all that, the science books that say the complete opposite. There is no X or Y chromosome, and burn the whole lot. Yes. Close and personal. What do you recommend doing before going into a 3-day dry fast? Very good that you ask. Definitely, I would be basically upping to about 6 grams of taurine for about 3 days. That's one thing that I'd be doing to make sure that I've actually got quite a bit in my system, so it can regulate the fluids and the electrolytes and stuff like that. That's one thing. The other thing that I would be doing is B vitamins, and I'd be taking like 2 in order to basically really pump up the amount of B vitamins, because they'll stay in the system for about 3.5, maybe 4 days before because you still have a lot of enzymatic processes that require B vitamins. in that regard. So, and I'd do that, and that'd be probably it. Fat soluble vitamins you don't have to worry about. You'll be releasing those out of your fat stores, and if you're fat adapted, you want to be in a good ketotic state. So I would definitely put myself into a bit of a ketotic state. Make sure you've got good ketone levels, you're well fat adapted and all that. I don't recommend dry fasting to people that are not fat adapted. They won't be able to manage it, and they'll have a lot of difficulty because it'll take them 3 days just to basically get into ketosis. You've got to be into ketosis. You've got to be fat adapted to be able to switch back and forward. Because that's the mistake. I did 3.5 day fast, not a problem. Really easy. I actually enjoyed it. I didn't have to worry about anything. Where Bart did it and he had a sore back, remember? Dehydration, because he was drinking alcohol and other things, and he went straight into it without preparing. He wasn't in ketosis, and it took him about 3 days just to try and get, and he ended up dehydrating himself because he couldn't actually access enough body fat to produce enough metabolic water. So he goes, he realized his mistake after, because he went back and did it again after he basically sorted himself out. He realized his mistake. But yeah, if you're not feeling that fantastic, it means that you were not well adapted to basically be doing a dry fast, because you're going to be feeling, if you're feeling lack of energy, that's a clear indication that you're not oxidizing fat efficiently. If you're basically feeling weak, dizzy or anything like that, that means a lot of things are not being regulated properly, including electrolytes and things like that. So you need to stop, basically. If you're doing a dry fast, just stop. If you want to continue it as a wet fast, yes, then throw in a bit of taurine with some electrolytes and stuff like that, and take that and a bit of salt into the mix of water, and then continue if you want to go for a sort of a 3 day sort of thing. But you have to be fat adapted to be able to do it and take those sort of supplemental preparations in that regard. And I wouldn't do beyond 3.5 or 4 days, due to you've still got your body still working, your brain's still working, your heart's still working, all these organs are working. They need to transcript enzymes to do things in the body, and those enzymes are micronutrient dependent in their functions. A number of them, B vitamins. Now, if you've got a really top microbiome, which I know that you don't, because you asked me that earlier, if you had a real ancestral microbiome, you probably could extend it further. And the reason why you could extend it further is because those bacteria will be producing the B vitamins. That's why the protocol with B vitamins and vitamin D. So you take vitamin D, 10,000 IUs. I forgot to mention that. Taurine, the B vitamins and all that. And that all, because the beneficial bacteria seem to need more vitamin D. Don't ask me why. They just do, especially the sort of lactobacillus. I don't know. Don't know. Yeah, some reason. Maybe they like sunbaking. I'm joking. But yeah, they do seem to have a higher requirement for vitamin D than some of the other bacteria. Just is. So that sort of helps. So if you've got those sort of good strains of a good microbiome, they'll produce a lot of your B vitamins. So, and your cellular sort of turnover, your cellular processes are reduced because you're not eating. So you're not breaking down foods and stuff like that to require more enzymes for that purpose. So you can sort of extend possibly a dry fast up to 6 days or whatever, but you really have to be super in a really good state, which you're not. And so, be careful is basically what I'm saying, or get coached by somebody who knows what they're doing. Like Bart is pretty good at it. He knows what he's doing when he's following his own rules, that is. So, yes. But yeah, be careful with that sort of stuff. No heroics, Nathan. Basically, if you don't feel that fantastic, just go back to a water fast or go back to normal eating. no heroics, you know. You can always do it later on. You know, I basically have been doing this sort of stuff now for about 11 years. 12 years ago was when I had my bypass surgery, in my mid 40s at the time, and now I'm nearly 56, and I've basically it took me quite a lot of years to sort things out. Believe me, you know, when you damage your body quite a bit, and I used to be a big seed oil consumer, so I did a lot of damage to my body. Aged my body, did a lot of damage. So I've sort of reversed or sort of stabilized, you could say, a lot of those processes, you know. So via the repairing, I've sort of not aged backwards, but sort of not gone not really aged like dramatically. So where I look at some other people, and you look at under their skin and all that, it's all really just, you know, you see it, it's all folds and stuff like that. There's guys at work that are in their 40s and they're like that. It's all their carbohydrates that they're actually, you know, consuming, and all that garbage, you know. And I used to have some of that sort of things, and I used to have more wrinkles and stuff like that, and that's gone down since I've been, you know, more low carb carnivore and stuff like that. A lot of that sort of shifted. I'm not saying it's going to keep you young forever. It's not going to happen. Let's, you know, let's be honest about that. But yeah, can be. I might need to add it back in. I don't have any other issues, but gave it up in December and had a return to constipation. No harm trying. Yep. There's no harm trying anything in that regard. Doing a bit of that as well. There's also with constipation, there's also Metaflor. It's the one that I actually did that actually deals with. It's a thing that I did it for a whole lot of different reasons, and the time that I was doing it, actually, I was on a sad diet, and I was getting a lot of constipation as well in that period. And I sort of was in the tropics, and I was sort of worried about dysentery and, you know, like waterborne diseases and stuff like that. So I came across this supplement, Metaflor, and it's the one that I've talked about before, and that German one, and it really sort of deals with some of these gut issues and stuff like that, diarrhea, constipation, you know, really gut being all over the place, and it's sort of settled down this sort of problem, and it's really very potent for some of these, especially constipation, I found. So it comes in these enteric capsules, these really thick enteric capsules, which some people may find a bit uncomfortable swallowing, especially when you have to do about a couple a day. It's the protocol, you know. So you take about 4 a day. I just did them in one hit. I just said bugger it, down the hatch. I could put a whole. I used to put a whole pill load. I used to get choked very easily, but then I learnt how to find a way around that. And then eventually now, you know, I can put a whole pill form in my mouth and just swallow it down you know, in one hit. And people go, how the bloody hell? You know, it's just, you get used to it. You learn, you retrain yourself. So when this was about, I remember now, I was 41, I think 41 or 42 when I did it. So this was either 3 years or 2 years before I had my cardiovascular operation. And I actually did the Metaflor, and it's from a German soldier who had dysentery. And so it actually does protect you. It's really good in that regard. But it also sorts out constipation. And I found a number of other people have used it and sorted out their constipation as well. It does go after the sort of bacteria that tend to increase constipation effects, which is interesting. But also, so Yes. Where the hell is that link?
Yeah, I don't have that one.
Found it. It's a beneficial E. coli strain. So it does have an international link as well. I actually got it from my pharmacy down here. It's so these are the enteric capsules that it's in. Metaflora. It's an E. coli strain. Nissel 1917, because that was the year that it was actually found in this person. Why isn't that working? That's annoying. See, for the relief and management of chronic constipation. And those are the capsules. It's a non-pathogenic strain of E. coli. But it also does protect you against dysentery and stuff like that, all these waterborne diseases as well. This company also has another product as well, which is a yeast. That one, like the E. coli one, that will basically colonize. So if you support it, it will colonize as long as you're not putting antibiotics back in. This one here will just pass through you. It won't colonize. It's a yeast, but it's really good for diarrhea. I've used it myself in the past.
Okay. That's really good. I have used that.
This is like traveler's diarrhea, for traveler's diarrhea, which, like barley belly and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I actually was, I can't remember, I think in Thailand, and I had some with me, and I ate some food, and I actually ended up with really severe diarrhea, and I basically took that and I was fine. And I was in Bali when I got what they call barley belly once, and I forgot to take my stash with me. And I was on the toilet. I ended up sleeping 2 days on the toilet. That's how bad I was. Really bad. I mean, just spent quite a few hours on the toilet for 2 days over there. So I wasn't a happy camper at all. That was in my kibble eating days as well. So, I don't know how my body would have reacted much better now, I think, compared to those days. But, but that is definitely a pretty good strain for that sort of stuff. So if you've got, and that also will colonize. So I know somebody actually combined it, like they still took it with the enteric pill. You still need to take it with the enteric pill because you have to protect it from stomach acid. But they combined, like they took it, and then like half an hour later, they also combined kefir. Sort of in with it at the same time. And it seemed like they did that in combination with kefir, and it seemed to sort out their constipation much faster than I had with other people. So I don't know whether there's sort of some synergies, like how bacteria work together in certain ways. There are synergies. So there's probably some relationship there, but I don't have any research, nothing to back me up. It's just anecdotes from another person that tried this combination and told me and said, Harry, I tried this and it really worked. I go, okay, interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, Sammy, good to see you, mate. Yeah, so it's... G'day, Bruce. Meat rules. Yes. Good stuff. Yes, they are. They are. Yeah. I don't blame them. People have had enough, with all this bullshit. Yes. The green madness continues in Europe and elsewhere. The whole system's stuffed. The whole energy system's stuffed, and all they can think is they're still thinking about green solutions and windmills and solar farms. And I'm going, do you guys realize that the economies of the world are on a cliff edge, due to food and energy insecurity?
Yep.
And you morons are basically, what the hell do you want to do? Start a revolution in Europe? God almighty, they're completely and utterly insane. Anything that actually happens is on their heads, and probably will be on their heads, or they'll be, potentially strung up in some countries in the long run if they continue this nonsense, actually undermining and threatening people. So send me any of these talks about LP little a. Can you give your thoughts I've talked about LP(a) profusely about a marker in the context of low carb. LP(a) is not to be worried about at all. LP(a), all species that can't use, that don't synthesize endogenously. Your keyboard's coming through, Lukey. You don't mind just muting yourself for a sec? So any sort of like animals is, what are they called there? Oh, anyway, there are some animals that basically endogenously produce vitamin C. Those animals do not actually produce LP(a) whatsoever, and they don't produce any sufficient uric acid. So animals that basically will use uric acid as an antioxidant rather than vitamin C, and they'll also use LP(a) as a method of reparative. So it basically plays the role. You'll always have some LP(a) because there's always some repairs of your collagen that's actually happening around your body, and especially in the endothelium. So you'll always have some LP(a) in your system. You can't go to zero. But if you have more, it just means that you're repairing stuff. Now, why you're repairing stuff and what's causing that additional stuff, it may not even be food related. It can be environmental things that can actually cause damage to your body, and LP(a) will be upregulated. So there's a lot of reasons why that marker goes up. That people basically consider it as a risk marker is nonsense. It is a reparative system that basically doesn't actually mean risk. It just means that it is fixing something. Now, if it's chronically elevated for years upon years, then it's not a risk marker, but it's indicating to you that you're doing something, or something in your environment is doing something to your body that is creating a lot of damage and inflammation that you need to stop to be able to bring it down to more normal levels. Simple as that. So it's really an indicator of underlying issues if it's elevated and if it's chronically elevated. That's all it is. But it's not a risk marker. A reparative system being called a risk marker. God almighty. It's like, all these sort of things. Odd ratios of incidence. It's a risk ratio turned into a risk ratio where you can barely infer anything, let alone call it a risk ratio. It's this misuse of language that basically then it leads to reductionist thinking and saying, oh, if LP(a) is a risk marker, then we need to send it down to zero. No, if you do that, you won't be able to heal your body. And if you aren't able to heal your body, you will die much quicker. So it's like LDL. You send LDL very low, you actually impede the healing process. It's just madness. It's just pretty much madness, this reductionist thinking. No, it is not a risk marker. It is an indicator of a problem that may be existing if it's chronically elevated for a length of time, and as you've had multiple tests, and it's elevated, then yes, but it may not even be food related. It may be environmentally related, something, There are people, one person that I remember talking to ages ago, or via email, that is, and they were working in a petrochemical sort of environment and having certain exposures they didn't realize. Then they went and did some tests and realized. And some of their inflammatory markers came back to normal once they actually addressed that issue. So why LP(a) or other inflammatory markers go up is not always the diet. Many cases it is, especially if you're on a species inappropriate, like a SAD diet that's got a lot of things that are going to be pushing it up. But you also have to consider your work environment, your home environment, like things like mold, can be a problem. And now that they're having some flooding in the east of Australia and other parts, even in Tasmania, we've had a bit of flooding here, but it hasn't affected me. It's in the north. I'm in the south. Now, these people may be exposed to, after that flooding, exposed to severe mold. It does happen in the US where, around the Mississippi, where you get a lot of flooding that can actually happen and a lot of homes end up with a lot of mold. Now, mold can be quite toxic to the body and actually increase your inflammation. So there's a lot of factors that can be at play. And we have to be very careful when we're talking about and looking at these things to determine what is the driver. Not why it's there. It's there as a reparative mechanism, but why is it being activated? So got to be careful with these things, how we interpret all the language we use, because then we end up in crackpottery, a mechanism that actually helps repair and protect. We suppress it with some medicine, then we don't have that repair, and that makes things worse. We don't recover very well. That's the illogicality of reductionism. And there's plenty of that in the low-carb community as well. It's not only in the general community. There's plenty of crackpots in the low-carb community, believe me. I just had, and some people that have also got wrong understandings of certain things, like Rob has. I mean, on some of the stuff, he's not too bad. Don't get me wrong. But on this issue, he's completely wrong, and he hasn't looked into it thoroughly enough. And even on his website, if you look in the description, he says, I've got no research. He said, this is anecdotes from my own patients. He points that out. It's quite clear. I'll actually put that up. I actually just realized that. Subconsciously, I must have registered that.
One of them has a typo.
I didn't put it in any of my videos, but subconsciously, I must have registered that. I just realized now. I said, did I actually see that? I just want to make sure that I did. That's impressive, Harry. Subconsciously, you picked it up, but your consciousness didn't pick it up. Anyway, it does happen. It's that bloody Roy bloke again. He's giving me that interesting look. Don't swallow, Harry, the wrong way, and die on YouTube. People get the wrong idea.
Oh, Harry. By the way, I want to share with you some of the disgrace I've been seeing lately. But the big crack pottery I've seen lately, some people saying that mold isn't toxic, but it's actually because it's growing on toxic materials, not because the mold itself is toxic.
What? It actually produces toxins. The actual mold itself produces toxins. Toxic chemical. Oh God! Really? Are people saying this?
It's the terrain theorists.
They're idiots. The terrain theorists have been idiots. As I said, I don't subscribe to either one of them. Both are wrong. The people that think that everything's out to kill you, and those who basically think, as I've said, all organisms in the body are basically either pathogenic, neutral, or beneficial. And it depends on the relationship you have with those organisms. And also compounds in the environment can be as well one of those three. It's like the old, is it nature or nurture? No, it's both. It's neither one or the other. It's both. It's an interplay of your genetics with the natural environment that you're in. It's the same thing with organisms. It's the interplay with those organisms, and it's either a beneficial, non-beneficial relationship. It's just, and the robustness, species appropriate diet, like the Indians in North America, those who were the Plains Indians, from these new diseases that had came in, those people were more robust, more of them survived, and they didn't see a collapse in their populations. Where those who basically were the kibble eating coastal people on the southeast of the US, they are the ones that died up to 90% in some cases, because they had much weaker, immune systems, because they weren't on a species appropriate diet. So species appropriate diet will give you more robustness to weather such assaults. But if, for whatever reason, you're still vulnerable. You're still going to get sick. Now, some will get sick and die. Some will get sick and overcome it because of the robustness. But it doesn't mean you won't get sick. It's still a pathogen. That means that's going after your body, replicating and trying to basically take advantage. In an environment where it's actually your immune system says, you're a friend, we've got a symbiotic relationship, I'll leave you alone. There's a long history. Something new, there's no symbiosis. It's, you're the enemy, I'm taking you out. And our immune system responds like that. Why would our immune system respond like that if it was terrain? Do you know what I mean? It's just illogical.
Exactly. It's illogical.
Makes no logic. It's illogical. Okay, he says here, research discussed. Data from our clinic practice. You cannot find this stuff in the literature yet. I thought he said something like that. There you go. And this is basically the video that he did. The insulin suppressed that he's been talking now for a couple of years. He actually claimed in the video. But that was basically that he says, it's his own data. Now, his clients may be doing, low protein, low taurine, low this sort of stuff, and who knows what else they're doing on their, these so-called veterans, keto carnivores, and if they're consistently staying in a very ketotic state, they're in a catabolic state forever, that is contraindicated. Not a good idea. And so, yes, obviously, if you've got clients like that, they probably are, you probably are seeing them in your clinic. But that doesn't mean all his clients are like that. And obviously, he's got no literature. It's basically anecdotes from clients that he's basing this. And he's looked at some research, because he understands some of the physiology and biochemistry, but he's misinterpreted some of that sort of stuff, as I pointed out in my videos.
Yep.
So, in terms of, especially in terms of glucagon and glucagon regulation in the system and stuff like that, I don't think he fully understands how some of that works properly and all that, especially in a proper species appropriate carnivore approach.
Like personally, I am becoming increasingly frustrated with a few things. It's that I see a lot of health professionals treating carnivore like it's just another tool on the belt. It's like, no, it's the species appropriate diet. Like if you want to eat other things, because you can tolerate, because you want to eat extra variety, you do that. That's fine. But the less meat you eat, the worse off you are. And it's like there are doctors making it out as if it's like such a dangerous thing. Oh, we don't know what happens long term. Yeah, and discussing the science is important, but at the end of the day, this is not complicated.
Exactly. Yeah, we had that. Look, for many years we had the fear of fat. We overcame that. Now we've still got the fear of the flesh of an animal, the protein part of the animal, and we still need to overcome that. Really, we need both. What is our body made of? Our tissue, cholesterol, proteins, amino acids, are required to build those protein structures, and fatty fats, both for energy and structural material. So we need all three of those things plus all the micronutrients. So yes, we've overcome one fear, which is the fat, as David points out here. Yeah, humans always consume fat, and if they didn't basically get enough, they engaged a Randall cycle seasonally and actually made sure that they had actually built up fat stores so they would have all year round sufficient fat stores to basically support their energy production in their body and their production of water, metabolic water, low deuterium metabolic water in their mitochondria. So via the Krebs cycle, that's where water production actually really happens, through the Krebs cycle. Most people think about the Krebs cycle as being something very different and sort of, but it's not. It's really creating water, and that water then has those hydrogen ions that provide the electrons and the protons to basically run the electron chain. That's really what it is, how it really works. Yes, that is what we use to create ATP. And the carbon then is combined with oxygen, and then it's turned into carbon dioxide, and we just go and breathe it out.
Mhm.
basically. Yes. So it's a fantastic system that we've got. Well, many animals have as well. But yeah, bone marrow, great stuff. In that regard. I actually love, I buy bones. I buy meat with bones. I like T-bone steaks
Mhm.
and stuff like that have got the gelatinous material, which is all that collagen type thing, which is, you know, and also the like bone marrow, or the
Yeah,
little bits and all that. I love just scraping that out, or
that's
getting it
awesome.
out of the bones myself. So yeah, and our ancestors have been doing that for a long time. It's this where other people go and buy. I don't mind the odd steak, but I do think that none of us as humans just consume just mere steaks and nothing else.
Mm.
That's not what our ancestors did. Our ancestors basically got basically they got that gelatinous material. They got
Mhm.
some of that calcium from those bones. They got some of those materials. They deliberately went out of their way and got that sort of stuff. So they did a whole lot of things. Now, obviously, I mean, people in the modern world like Bart say, well, I can get it. I can have some like dairy cheese and stuff like that, and I can get it from
Mhm.
there. That's true. You can. That's legitimate to say that. Yes, you can. But there's more in bones than just calcium. There
Yep.
are other minerals as well, and micro and trace minerals. But then again, you can say, well, I could go for a colloidal mineral type, like a trace mineral supplement, and get it that way. Yes, you could as well. I've done that in the past as well. So, and I'm not, some people just don't like bones and they don't like stuff like that. And I understand. But there are still a lot of trace minerals that are required. So if you're not getting that, make sure that the ruminant animal has spent some time out consuming grass and
Mhm.
taking, because it will have more of those trace minerals under those circumstances. If it's been in a feedlot for far too long, it may not have as many, because the longer it's in a feedlot, the more it's going to use its own stored
Yes.
trace minerals and stuff like that, and will reduce those for its own enzymatic processes. So there is that. I think that if the animal's been in a feedlot being fed for about maybe a month and a half or maybe 2 months, it's probably okay. Once it sort of gets out into multiple months, sometimes in some places they just put them in there. They really put them in there for like 3-4 months. You know, then it's going to be slightly lower. It's still going to be better than even that supermarket food is still going to be way better than plants in terms of the trace minerals and all that. What we're talking about here is optimal. We're not talking about, that's the sort of the difference. But again, you could basically a bit of bone marrow and a bit of bones and stuff like that, things like that. I get the chicken legs and I actually eat the back parts, all the stuff where you got the hyaluronic acid and you're getting all these trace minerals that are in all those joints.
Mhm.
And I'm just munching through them. People see me, I'm having chicken, you know, and I'm munching through, all these bones and all that. And they're going, what the fuck's, what the hell is Harry doing? But yeah, I'm basically getting my trace minerals and I'm getting that
Yep.
sort of stuff. That's what I'm doing. So, by having chicken once a week, I'm able to do that without having to do bone broth. Because sometimes I get a bit lazy, as Hello Kitty will
Yes.
say. Why haven't you done it? Oh, I'm lazy because I've got other things. I'm busy, So yeah, she gives me a hard time sometimes about those things. Oh, thank you. I don't know what I'm right about, but you know, 50-50%. I'm somewhere there. I'll take it. I'll take any compliment. People don't, get many compliments. So thank you, Bruce. Ah, yes, definitely 100% man-made.
Oh,
All this sort of stuff. And that's the thing, that you're an animal. Good to see you here, matey. Yeah, it's really important that people remember that that's a sort of, you know, when you're really looking at natural foods, there's not much out there to eat.
no.
And
Yep.
that's safe either. That is safe
See,
as well.
like this is funny because I used to hear a lot about this, but especially coming from here, and people would say that, oh, look at the native Brazilians in the Amazon. They'll say things of the sort. Oh, they eat low salt and they eat a lot of carbs and everything, but you don't understand that they did start doing some primitive agriculture. They only eat those things because they actually have primitive agriculture for like roots. So you have the cassava roots. They actually do a lot of that. Okay, and a lot of them don't have a good lifespan. So I don't understand why I still get people talking about that. They're like, oh, but look at what they do. They're not a bar for health, especially the Yanomami, which used to be often mentioned in the context of low salt diets. Like the very
Exactly.
studies on the very studies on them, they were showing that they had health issues. So I don't understand why people use them as a reference. So it's terrible,
Yeah.
really.
Precisely. Yeah. And that's it. Exactly, precisely that. Most people have these strange way of viewing these things. It's in the. I just put it in the chat. I think Tracy put it as well in there earlier. Trader. So, but that's the one we only use the free form, because that's how it is in animal foods in a free form in the fluids. These other things that or taurine, which is there is no, it doesn't have a different isomer. There's it's just taurine. It's a sulfonic. It's not it's sulfonic acid. It's not really. We call it a sulfur amino acid, but it's because it's in animal foods. But it's really a sulfonic acid. It doesn't have any isomer like some of the other amino acids can have a different isomer of L or D. So yeah, that's a sort of difference. So, but they still use the isomer of L-taurine. They go, huh? God almighty. So yeah, a lot of the supplement makers, especially the for the bodybuilding, I think it's like it's marketing for the
Yep.
the bodybuilding community.
Mhm.
That's really what it is. It's no other. Yeah, that's fairly what it really comes down to. Yeah, sometimes some people with L-citrulline, it's because it is a vasodilator,
Mhm.
and for some reason, some people can actually, like I say to people, stick to sort of 1 gram. It's safe. That's what I do, 1 gram only. And it's only on the like my exercise days and stuff like that I do 1 gram, because it is, it doesn't affect me negatively. For pre-sexual intercourse, I do use a bit more, but that's a different thing because it does help in that area. It is like a Viagra sort of, has a Viagra sort of effect of vasodilation. But obviously you don't want to go too high either because too much nitric oxide can be a problem as well, unhealthy. So has side effects. But some people seem to actually produce more nitric oxide than others. And I think that may be where people can't handle that excess amount of nitric oxide generation. So I don't tend to have that problem. Trader, you may actually have that problem. So stick to a lower dose that you can tolerate in that regard. And also try, and if you are doing, like you're doing any weightlifting or any exercise or whatever, actually try and actually incorporate it into that physical activity, like half an hour before, and utilize it for the purpose that it's really meant to use to improve that vasodilation, for that purpose. Obviously, you could use it for other sort of activities, enjoyable activities, but I'll leave that for you to ponder in your own mind. KL, good to see you here. And that's all the links. Tracy did put up all the links and all the Walmart ones. Yeah, so she's actually did put the whole lot up. So thank you for that as well.
I
And
I
there was
think
the actual Australian link as well.
yep. I
She's
think
covered them all.
I've linked Nature's Life Taurine like 50 times in the past month. There's so many people asking for it on Bart's server that they're like, oh, which Taurine brands do you guys recommend? I keep sharing the link around there. And
Okay.
one guy even said, oh, you guys should rename this server to Taurine. Because we
Yeah,
just keep
see,
talking about it all the time.
yeah, that is right. Sammy, yeah, it is the Eid. That's basically people eat a lot of meat, and I hope you enjoyed a big meaty meal as well. Yeah, look, technically speaking, we should have never needed, because if you take a look, like 100 grams, which is 3.5 ounces, 3.53 ounces of oysters will give you 1.2 grams of taurine. And a lot of the other seafood are very high. And the reason why they're high is because they're less, they're fresher. Animals are fresher, like, or they'll be snap frozen, or they'll be delivered and sold on the day, the fish. And so it tends to be fresher. With ruminant meat, we hang it up for months, and then we deliver it into supermarkets. We cut it up by that stage, and we lose even more water content. And what actually happens is the levels for the same 100 grams drops dramatically, where in a wild animal it can be, anywhere between 300-400 milligrams in that regard, and then it can sort of drop down to about 100 or less, once it's been hung. So you have to get 1 gram only, you have to eat a kilo of meat, 2.2 like ounces, where before you could actually eat a quarter of that and get the same amount. So you'd, with a carnivore species appropriate, you'd eat double that, you'd get two plus grams, 2 to 3 grams easy. So we got good levels of taurine. That's why I used to say 3 grams is the sort of used to be my base for anybody healthy that's on a carnivore diet. You don't need more than that. And the reason I said that was primarily for that reason, that most people are eating ruminant animals, which are hung up and lose a lot of their taurine content. I'm just trying to replace back what they would have got from a freshly slaughtered animal, is what I'm trying to do. So that's what I was trying to do in that regard. Now, in terms of higher dosing for limited periods or a certain amount of times, plus considering the methylation issues for some people, where you need to deal with those with choline and other approaches, that's for the therapeutic side, which when I send emails to people, I tell them exactly how to approach these things. But when it comes back to, the general public, that's I mean, you can eat quite a lot of oysters and get, with some meat on that day, and end up getting 5 grams. It's not going to be a problem, consistently doing higher dosages, we don't know. I mean, even my upper limit is 10, and that's based on research. We don't have any research above that. Now, there is some rat research where they were doing for the equivalent, which could be 5 years in human lifespan, and they were doing something like 20, what was it? I can't remember whether it was 26 or 28 grams of taurine, and they were reversing major fibrosis within the body. So like a lot of damage and fibrosis in the body. So that was incredible. So they were inducing in these rats massive damage and fibrosis, and then they were reversing this with the equivalent of 5 years in these massive doses. Now, what has Harry done to reverse his fibrosis in his heart? He's no longer with his cardiologist because he's been discharged, because basically he's got rid of his fibrosis and all that sort of problems in the heart. So what was I doing in certain levels? Well, I was doing about, at the time, 15, 16 grams. I was doing it for a couple of years. But I was actually also taking about 3 or 4 grams of. I don't recommend any of this. I know this is not recommendation. This is what I was doing. So let me make that quite clear. I would have to assess people's genetics and a lot of things and, what they're eating and all that. But I went hard and all that. Now, obviously, you can do it a bit slower, with about 5 grams, with 2 grams of choline, and do it over a decade, which is probably much safer in that regard, with going to be less side effect issues potentially in that regard. I'm just saying what I did because I was impatient, pretty much frustrated with a lot of ending up in getting oxalate issues and losing a lot of sulfur as well, due to keto and low carb, and basically doing a lot of plants, and ended up in 5 years with 4 kidney stones. So that was a pleasant experience. Twice being surgically removed with laser. Yeah, no. Let alone one of the old nurses, a younger nurse, came around to basically take the actual thing out, which was the stent. And the older one turned up and go, no, don't worry, I'll sort out Mr. Serpanos. You can go and actually clean up over there. And then she just ripped it out really, and I'm going, oh, I'm going, God hates me. So, yes. Yeah, bedside manner, 0. So, yes, eat those green, that green nonsense, and you'll have a similar beautiful experience like me, whether it's coming out of your anus or out of your via your kidneys, out of your, pissing ducts, or your whatever you want to call them. Anyway, have to sort of consider the other types of humans. What are there? 70 different varieties.
Yeah. Oh god! Don't remind me of that. Oh
God. Yes. What was that? Any thoughts on Georgia gallstones coming down? Don't even know the woman.
No, so those are basically monoliths, Harry. There's are very weird structures that were randomly built in the United States on Georgia some time ago, and they had sort of like I think you
Okay.
must know about it. And they had like they were sort of like a play on the Decalogue, so the 10 Commandments, and but
Okay.
they were weird, and they were probably satanic inspired. They had
Okay.
things like keeping human population under 500 million and things of the sort. They
So
had
some
all these weird laws.
some misanthropic sort of
Yeah.
ideas. Okay.
Yes, and a lot of people.
That'd fit in with the Gates and people like that. Just send them over
Yep.
to Gates. He'd love to put that up again on his property.
Yeah, and it's funny because
Okay.
those are weird
I don't watch a
circumstances, and
lot as much TV as many other people. I've sort of switched off from all that crap.
yeah, but
Okay,
no,
so
yeah,
I must have missed
yeah,
this.
and it's really weird, and I on the more what's the word? On the more red pill areas of the web, people are talking about this because it's weird that
Okay,
they got rid of these stones, and they used to be actually a tourist spot. And it's weird because looking at it from like a financial standpoint, a commercial thing, the locals actually love the stones because they brought in tourists.
okay.
So why would they simply get rid of them? And no one knows like what happened after it was like a random detonation and destroyed the stones, and then
I
afterwards
mean,
they're
they didn't need. They could actually, if there were text and stuff like that maybe they found a bit offensive for whatever.
Yep.
I mean, I'm Greek Orthodox, and basically, you could always basically paint over them or remove them in
Yep.
some way, but leaving the stones the way they are for the
Yep.
tourism value. Why destroy something when you can
Yep.
actually
Exactly.
repurpose it for some other purpose, and so, and in that way, one, you eliminate the offense on the one hand, the religious offence, but on the other hand, you still leave a structure there that has some tourist value that local people can benefit, so they're not peeved off about it. So, yeah, anyway, it's a bit weird. At the end of the day, I'm also, when it comes to art and stuff like that, I have concerns when people start becoming a bit, let's burn books. I disagree with that book, or I'm going to burn that book, or I disagree with that thought, I'm going to burn that. No, I mean, I may disagree with certain texts of certain books out there. I may disagree with certain opinions of people and stuff like that, but I'm not going to burn them, and I'm not going to burn the books or anything like that. I think that this is part of human history, part of human, things that are created. And I think they can be debated. People can disagree about them and all that. But once you get into the burning and destroying and all that, you're getting into sort of a very dark place. I think you're getting in a very dark place in terms of human society, and we've seen what that happened after the 1930s. We saw a lot of dark individuals destroying culture, destroying churches, destroying books, burning books in Germany, destroying in parts of Eastern Europe, destroying churches and all sorts of things. And we know where that ends up. That's not a future that I want to live in, or most of us want to live in. And so, I see some art. I go to museums, and sometimes I see certain art and I go, people actually pay for this sort of shit. This is crap. But the thing is, I respect the right for people to have that sort of, even though I may be offended or consider it crap, and it doesn't have value for me, but it has value for other people. And you can't go around and, you can't say you want to live in a free society, a democratic free society, but with a rule of law, and respect other people's right to have different views, opinions, and live their life differently. They will be judged at the end. In my book, it's not for man to judge another man. It's for that's the role of God. The God you believe in. It's not for me to sit in judgment of others. So they will. For me, it's to basically see that, not to judge, but not also to embrace either. I don't need to embrace it. I can just reject it. As you said earlier, if it's got certain symbology which may be contrary to, the Orthodox or the Christian faith in general, or the monotheistic faiths in general in totality, obviously you can reject it. But, going that next step, is a dark step to take, it's like we all live in glass houses. Stop throwing stones, He who's basically without sin cast the first stone, So, that's when you get into dark, when people start, I'm getting on my hind horse and I think I'm morally superior to you and I'm going to take you out. So, yeah, you don't end up on a morally superior basis when you start taking people out or taking things out. You basically descend into the madness of violence, and really, that's basically chaos is, what demonic forces in the end promote and support. So when you go down that path and take that approach, you're actually just embracing that sort of stuff, in your behavior. So, yeah. Then they call themselves Christians, some people. I think sometimes they forget these sort of things, or just ignore them because they're not fashionable, or faith isn't a question of fashion, whether it's fashionable at all. Where's Vivid Mouse? I don't know. He's a New Zealander. He may be basically, looking after his relatives on the plate, that is.
Speaking of localities, Harry, I have British Isle DNA, and I don't even know why.
Okay.
I have no idea why. So he came out as a southern Italian, which okay makes sense. But then there was like a bunch of British Islander, and I was like, what?
Oh well, you probably have some pirate blood in you.
Yes. Now I need to figure this out. Oh god.
Yeah, I'm pretty much uncomplicated. Pretty much 99.1% Greek, primarily from the Peloponnese, the southern part, between Sparta, Pylos, and Corinth, primarily my genetics. And I've got 0.9%, less than 1% of the old Anatolian genes, where the Hittites and all the Illyrians and all these other populations that pretty much don't exist anymore. But, from those old agricultural genes, so less than 1%. So that's, it's very basic in that regard. But it's also, it sort of explains that these are communities that basically were much more insular and always at war with others, and so to keep out the others, so to speak. And as a consequence, they sort of amongst themselves, out of survival requirements, you end up. But obviously, the Americas is a different place because a lot of people came from a lot of different places there. And obviously, there's going to be, it's like Australia now, a lot of the people here are America, North America. There's going to be more mixing. There's more interactions between people from different parts of the world. It's just inevitable. I mean, even myself with an Indonesian person, as a partner. So very different than probably what my ancestors were doing. So it's very different in that regard. So yeah, it'd be interesting to find out, whether you've got a bit of pirate blood, because there were a number of, they were, let's say, paid by the Crown to do piracy for the British government. That's the real thing. And Legacy KHD goes, Harry is pure. It's great to be in the club. Legacy civilizations. Yeah, they're still around.
By the way,
and so there was through the Caribbean, but also you had that northern part from beyond Venezuela, where you got Guyana, that sort of you may have some blood from that northeastern part.
Okay.
And those people basically did have interactions with British pirates and people like that. And so there were conflicts in those parts of the Caribbean. And so there would have been some admixture there that would have happened. And so if you've got relatives from that northern eastern part of Brazil, they would have interacted with those people through. You do. Oh, there you go. They would have had trading with those people. And that trade meant that, So basically that's where it's coming from.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. And I was fairly surprised then.
If you go back and look at some of the history books of that specific region and look at some of the conflicts there that were happening between the French and the Spaniards and the British, you'll actually see that the British were there controlling a number of these islands and attacking the French there. That's where there's French Guiana, where they actually launched the Ariane rockets. There's all that area, that region was either controlled by Spain or controlled by France or whatever. There was constant conflict with the British pirates and the British Crown in that region. And that's where that would have come from. So you've learned something about it, your own history.
Awesome.
But, do check out the history. It's quite interesting, sort of the pirate stories in there, in that region. Next, I'll see you with a patch, with an eye patch and a pirate hat.
But I'm fairly surprised. It's like I'm more European than I anticipated, and on the African bit, it's mostly from Argelia and Ethiopia.
Okay,
that was fairly interesting as well.
Well, Nigeria makes sense because a lot of the like the African slave trade and all that primarily came from that area. And that was basically they were at war with the West Africans, and the West Africans were the ones selling these people when they captured them to both the Arabs and to the Europeans. So that's what was actually happening. Actually, most of the slave trading in Africa was actually run by black Africans. It wasn't actually run the end, like, so HD's, because he's from Ethiopia, he goes, "Welcome to the family, Luke."
I was just expecting him to say something. I was like,
have a gun for you. Yes, basically, if you go over to Ethiopia with HD, basically just get a gun, lock and load. That's what he means. He's an adventurous character. So, yes, ban parlors. I mean, you know how it works. Stimulus primarily goes to the 1%. Do you have to even ask that? And remember, those corporates had to pay some wages. That's what I meant, for their workers not to even turn up. Well, they actually skim the majority of that as profit, obviously, like they do from their labor. Do you have to even ask that, mate? Doing dishes, okay. Doing some domestics. Agricultural revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. Yes, they have. Very much so. Nah, we have a big gun culture. And yeah, beautiful women also. Now he's bragging. Actually, so I have seen some of the Ethiopian women. They are very attractive women, I have to say. And big guns, yes. I mean, west coast of Greece is very much like that as well. So I know we in the villages up there, we just get shotguns and we just walk around, So it's very much a very similar. That's especially it was back in the 70s and 80s and all that. When I was back then, it's probably less now. Most kids are indoors on their tablets like everywhere else, unfortunately. So a bit different back then, but still in the villages, it's still a bit like it was. I mean, my first cousin from Dad's twin brother, George, he very much does a lot of this sort of like mountaineering and kayaking and hunting and stuff like that. So he takes tourists out into the mountain areas from where we come from, and he'll take them kayaking down river systems. He'll take them basically hunting and actually showing them how to, fishing, because they've got like a couple of boats. I'll go out and do fishing and stuff like that. That's one of their main industries that the family uses up there, from the big lake that we're on right off the main road, smack into the lake. So, anyway, okay. Everybody's talking about food and more food. Mathers, how are you, mate? Is it true that the products of cooking, like heterocyclic amines, no, it's all bullshit. It's basically bullshit. There is no possibility of cancer or anything like that. It's such trace levels that it's so small, it's irrelevant. You'll actually get more burning if you toast bread. You'll get more heterocyclic amines than what you'll get from meat. So, and even they had to actually cook meat for 32 hours before they could get above trace levels in terms of, trace levels of primary and secondary oxidative products, that is. Heterocyclic amines produced are very small. Our livers can detox that very easily. Can actually detox. You could eat a couple of kilos of highly charred meat and your liver would still be able to detox that. What they did in the rat studies, they gave them mega doses. It's impossible, I mean, come on. That's not physiologically possible in any animal. Because the volume of food that you would have to consume to get those levels is just impossible. This is why most of the epidemiological associational data is so low in terms of association. it's irrelevant. It's less than 2%, than an odds ratio. They call it a risk ratio, I know, but that's bullshit. It's an odds ratio in statistics, because risk, it has to be a cause and effect. This is just an associative inference. That's all of incidences that are actually happening, that are being recorded. And their value is less than 2. So it's usually 1.17. They call it 17 or 20% or whatever, but that's an odds ratio of 1 point something. In order to even start a hypothesis, you need an odds ratio of 2 to 3. In order to infer, not prove causality, infer causality, you need basically an inference, an associative relationship of an odds ratio of 10 or more. Traditionally, that's what epidemiologists would say, like, 10, like Bradford Hill said 10 or more, like 10 to 30, which was tobacco. Some epidemiologists now are saying, well, from 6 to 10. I don't agree with that. If you've got an associative study that has very low confounding, yes, you can probably come down to 6. But if you've got an associative study, especially with food, that has got high confounding, you have to go to 10 or more. As you can see, that's thousands of orders of greater magnitude than an odds ratio of 1.17, which is processed meat. And actually, normal meat actually even has less than that. It's usually 0.07 or 0.05. In some cases, it's even less than 1, which means it's actually in the positive direction, so to speak. And most of these is done with sad dieters. And what are sad dieters eating? A whole lot of other crap. So it's associated with nonsense, highly confounded nonsense. So yeah, it's just garbage, mate. Don't even worry about it. Even with primary, secondary oxidative products and aldehydes, you get bugger all even after, what was that pork that they cooked? I think it was 2 hours or 3 hours. I can't remember. And they were only getting trace levels. Nobody's going to cook meat for that long. It's going to be so dried out and so, it's not going to be very interesting to eat. Let's put it that way. And they were only getting trace amounts, let alone when you're actually doing, like 32 hours, which was slightly more than trace amounts. But even then, it was nothing to kill you. So it's just nonsense, mate. It's not. It's like a lot of the myths are out there. It's one myth after another. Believe me, it's just absolute garbage.
Used to get all of that from the vegans, but now it's the raw people talking about this because they are against cooking.
Yeah, look, I know. They're a bunch of ass hats. They've got no idea what they're talking about. People have been cooking for 1.5 million years. Okay, 1.5 million years people have been cooking. How all of a sudden this is going to create cancer? Why are the cancer rates going up? Well, what happened in the 1970s that saw an explosion in cancer rates, in particular, these within, stomach cancers, all these bowel cancers and all these. What happened? Would it have something to do where we flipped the food pyramid from 70% animal foods and 30% plants to 70% plants and 30% animal foods, and animal foods that are questionable whether they're animal foods because they're so highly processed and so highly modified? Would it have something to do with that? That seems to correlate much better tightly with cancer rates and so does glyphosate, and so does basically many other things. Not claiming anything, I'm just saying it correlates, associatively, and many other things as well. So why point the finger at the meat, which we've been consuming in large amounts for much longer periods of time in our history, and there was no problem back then? So it's nonsense, Mathis. It's nonsense. Anyway, anything you cook basically will create, HCAs, and aromatic hydrocarbons. Anything you basically, but the question is, it's the dose. If we didn't have a liver that can detox, yeah, it could be a problem then. Yep. Harry, you said some of the plants today didn't exist, so we shouldn't be eating them. Basically, I'm just saying that the claims that people make claims that we've been eating certain types of plant, a certain volume of plants in the past, in the interglacial periods or whatever. What I'm saying is that none of the plants that we consume today are the identical plants that we consumed in those paleo times, in those interglacial periods, or in those periods when we had access to them. They were very different. They were more tart. They were less sweet. They were smaller. They had less fructose and glucose concentrations. They were more fibrous. If you see like a plant, there's a tuber that they actually have in, like Mary talked about it, the Hudzas that they actually have seasonally. And what they do is it's so fibrous, you have to cook it, and then it's so fibrous, you have to suck out parts of the fleshy stuff and throw away the fiber or spit out part of it. So it's so damn fibrous because or in some parts of Africa, you'll see them like they'll be using like a wooden type device to literally pulverize stuff to get rid of all the fiber, because I know it's, contraindicated. People don't eat that. It's not going to be harsh on the gut, and they knock it out. So they're left with something which they can use as a paste for certain types of foods, and then they can combine it with milk or other things and give it a thickener type in that regard. In West Africa, they use they'll collect insects seasonally, and they'll use insect flour and stuff like that, which is animal-based flour, pretty much. So, and for other uses. So there's all sorts of things, but they're real things that people can extract from the environment that we know. We've seen tribal people and others even today doing that sort of stuff. But all this other sort of stuff just didn't exist out there. It doesn't exist. As I said, watermelons, little thing that actually fits in the palm of your hand. Now it's this big, massive. It's not the same. It's like a little palm in your hand. It has a lot of whiteness. Most of it is where the L-citrulline is. So now you can understand is you've got something which is less sweet. It's got a lot of this sort of the white stuff, very little of the red stuff. So it's got more L-citrulline that is actually permeating in this water thing. You consume that water as a hydration thing and all that, but also you're getting a nitric oxide boost. That's a health food, in a sense. It's sort of like a biohack, a plant biohack. As I said, plants can be medicine in that regard. So it's a completely different kettle of fish compared to what we do today, where we've created these big watermelons. It's got very little rind. The rind, the white part's very small, thin. It's mostly the red part, all the sugary stuff and all that. It's sugary water, basically. That's what it is, watermelon. The modern watermelon, that is, not the ancient one. So it's very different. So well, animals don't have the anti-nutrients. Animals are animals. All animals basically have fleshy tissue that's made of amino acids, fatty acids, and cholesterol. Every single animal, the old animals and the current animals, still have the same sort of flesh. They just have a different digestive system. That's the only difference between them. Some may be, hindgut fermenters, some may be, multi-chamber fermenters, or have different approaches, the way they extract their nutrients. But fundamentally, at the end, what are they getting? Short-chain fatty acids, which is a saturated fat, and they're also getting a whole lot of small organisms, which they absorb in the final acidic chamber or the acidic stomach, which they regurgitate up or reconsume to basically extract more stuff through that stomach system. So, where they like gorillas eat their feces and stuff like that, this sort of stuff. So they ferment it first, and then they'll re-eat it after they've fermented it in their basically cecum, which is our appendix, because it's shrunk in that regard. So they have other mechanisms and other reasons why they do what they do and all that. But, an animal is not the same as a plant. A plant has got anti-nutrients. A plant has got, compounds that we needed to domesticate those compounds out of the plant to make it editable so it wouldn't actually kill us or make us sick. So we reduced that. We've modified that. Animals, we may have domesticated certain animals and all that, but to make them more calmer, more easier to handle. Basically, what we've made is we've made a wolf, we've turned into a dog, which is more docile and more loyal. We've taken basically animals like big, like cows and bulls and stuff like that, which in the old days, there would have been those oryxes, the big, really rough. Their genetics are very similar, but we've actually domesticated them, actually made them more placid. We've encouraged certain, epigenetically and all that. But generally speaking, if you look at the flesh of these animals and all that, very similar. Even the fat composition is not too dissimilar, This is the other nonsense that a lot of vegans say, oh, the animals in the wild are leaner. Actually,
yes.
If you look at antelopes and stuff like that, the level of fat to protein composition is very similar to many of our domesticated animals.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's nonsense. There's only one difference in one of the animals, which is much closer to the old mammoths and stuff like that, but it's not close to them. It's sort of somewhere in between, like a halfway house, and that's with certain type of Middle Eastern type of sheep that have that big hind back part behind the back part of their tail, where there's those big fat stores, where they've got bigger fat stores and stuff like that, and all that. They're the biblical people in that area. Maybe they knew something. Yes, to basically have much more fattier animals and stuff like that. That's what our distant ancestors in the paleo world used to consume. But look, animal safety, there's no anti-nutrients. So, fat, cholesterol, and protein in an animal is the same thing in every animal. So just because it looks different, if a cow looks different than a sheep, you're still getting amino acids, fatty acids, and cholesterol from that animal. So what's the difference? Fundamentally, when it hits your stomach, it all gets denatured, Jason. In your stomach acidity being at a pH of 1 to 1.5 is denaturing your food. It's breaking it down to basic amino acids, fatty acids in that stomach. That's the purpose of a highly acidic stomach, to do that. Because you don't want foreign proteins coming in. They can be sort of reactive if they get into the bloodstream. So basically, we break down all stuff we get denatured, because everybody goes, oh, denatured protein is really going to... Well, that's what the stomach does. It denatures protein to basic amino acids. And then you absorb them through the middle part of your intestine, those amino acids, and then your body takes those amino acids as building blocks and uses protease type enzymes to basically build those amino acids into, peptides, which are short chain aminos, or more complex enzymatic structures by transcription in the basically mRNA, messenger mRNA from your genes that tell the actual, that endoplasmic reticulum around that rough part around the actual nucleus. That's where the machinery, that basically where you're actually producing all these different proteins structures. That's where they're produced. Your enzymes and everything else are produced there. That's the area. And that's where it also needs taurine to properly guarantee the proper protein folding of those proteins so they function properly. Yes, very important. Once you understand these sort of things, you realize, plants are not the same. Plants have certain similar structures, but they have very different defense mechanisms. Animals, they have nails, big hooves and stuff like that. That's not an anti-nutrient. That's just a different a different structure using the same materials. It's a different thing. In an animal, in a plant, obviously, it's a different, very cellulose type structures are very similar, but everything else can be quite different because it's using chemical warfare to defend itself. Not the same. Animals do not use chemical warfare. They use nails, hooves, and us, bows and arrows, and now guns and nuclear bombs and whatever else to defend ourselves. So very different. So let's not confuse the two. So no, animals, it doesn't matter how they evolve, they'll always be food that will provide us protein, fat, and cholesterol and other micronutrients. So with no anti-nutrients. And they'll only harm us if basically, they're a cat, like a lion or whatever, and we basically are not, a bit careless in the way we move on the savannah, and then they may rip us to pieces. But otherwise, it's not going to be their flesh that's going to cause the problem, but their claws. Yes, so we have to be careful about this sort of nonsense that people come up with. Oh, that's not ancestral. Well, no, flesh is flesh. Let's put it that way. Glass of kefir, nothing like it, is also nice before cycling to work. Yes, it is actually. I have to agree with you on that one, Mousy. I definitely have to. Yes. Get the protein up, Bruce. Get the protein up. Don't fear the protein. KL. Hi, Harry. I always tend to have cold hands and feet during winter. After switching to carnivore, I find they seem to get even more cold now. Any ideas? Not enough taurine. That's why.
Yep.
or poor circulation. Most people that actually get enough taurine, because what happens is with water retention, there can be sort of like a bit of a, it can sort of mask some of this cold hands and stuff like that. When you drop certain level of volume of water in your body, when you go on a more low carb or whatever state, or even carnivore, which is healthy because you don't want excess water volume. But at the same time, there's less, you could say, circulating heat that could potentially come through that additional fluid. But which is very important, eating sufficient protein has more a thermogenic effect, plus the taurine that you'll take with that, or supplementing, will actually increase your internal temperature. Most people that actually do consume taurine, they actually find that they actually feel warmer, and they don't have those issues whatsoever. And I find even winter, I'm out with t-shirts and shorts, and even Hello Kitty, she used to have the same problem. Hello Kitty used to have the problem. She's not here. She'd confirm that. She used to have the same damn problems. And most people that take taurine, a couple of grams or whatever, eliminate this completely. They actually feel warmer, and they sweat much easier, and they actually feel warmer.
Yep.
It's the complete opposite.
Yeah, and there's the
it explains why ancestors used to eat quite a bit of food, meat, when they captured their animals and stuff like that. They didn't fear protein. They didn't, not only did they eat a lot of fat, but they also had a lot of protein because they didn't fear either one, and they slept outdoors. Remember?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's also, are you eating enough? Because I feel like there's a lot of emphasis on weight loss in this community, and sometimes people, even when they've lost enough weight, they still don't eat enough.
Good point. Yep, that's a big one as well. Undereating will basically, on any diet, undereating on any approach will basically make you colder. And many people sometimes get the satiety effect and say, I don't want to eat anymore. And they undereat. Like one of the guys, I think, left a comment and said, I'm only eating 50 grams of protein in a couple of meals, or 30 grams or this amount or whatever in a couple of meals, 2 meals or 3 meals or whatever. And I'm going, and this is a big person, and I'm going, I'm smaller than you, mate, and I'm doing nearly double the intake. Get with a program. Either you're a carnivore or you're a keto person. You can't be both, you know.
Mhm.
And keto is contraindicated as far as I'm concerned. There's find to be in this low grade ketotic state and fat adaptation. That's important. But beyond that, that was, yeah. I'm on 4 grams of taurine a day at the moment, eating at least 700 to 800 grams of meat, which is fairly good. 4 or so eggs a day. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You could have some pre-existing circulatory problems that never got resolved. Have a bit of a go at actually putting L-citrulline in. That may actually improve vasodilation and actually get fluids around your body a bit more efficiently moving, and that may help, because I've found that some people with if they've actually, because everybody, I mean, as he said, he's just come to the more recently to the carnivore diet. Some people may have underlying sort of issues, and that can take some time. I mean, remember, it took me a decade to sort of fix up my vasodilation issues as well.
Yep. Yeah.
It took me some time to basically fix up my my plumbing, you could say, my vascular, as they call it, the vascular tree. And some also people have like very thin arteries and veins around the body. Because I know this, because basically when I looked into the research, I realized there was this lady, for instance, because she was having a stent done when I was actually having my heart disease. And we were actually talking about, and that's what actually then I looked into it later on, and she said, they have to use a stent even though it's so blocked. They can't, they were, if it was wider, they'd actually use bypass, a different approach. But or they would use this sort of balloon thing or whatever. So they have to use this other method because they're worried, because it's in an area where they can't really do easily surgery. And I've got a lot of my veins and arteries are very thin in many places. And so I go, okay, that's interesting. So there are people with those sort of different structures in their vascular tree. And that also can be, if you've got, in the middle part of your body, of what you can imagine on the ends, in that regard. So she actually did say to me, she had circulation problems. She complained about, as, I just thought of it now. Yeah. So that's really interesting in that regard. So I say, yeah, that's a possibility. I mean, let's face it, there are differences between us all. Anyway, guys, I would love to say and chat a bit more, but I have to be somewhere else, and I'm going to do an absolute runner. So we've been here for about 3.5 hours. I was intending to be less than that. I just realized I went way over my limit, and I'm already late to where I was going. Yes. Yes, we've covered all that. And I don't see anything. Yeah, and also when you do, like, it's different. Like when you do it like a vitamin D supplement, it's going to have, anything processed will have higher deuterium, but it's very little, so it's not a problem. But when you're doing like multiple powders of protein powders every single day, 30, 40 grams and all that, that can accumulate to quite a lot of deuterium coming in from that processed stuff. That's why I'm not a big eat your meat and eggs. I'm not a big I'm a powder person or promoting your powders. I may say, well, an essential amino acid powder for older people, either for the COVID stuff or for older people, with a combination of taurine and all that, because basically, they're already going downhill. I'm just trying to slow it down. They're not going to change their ways. So it's just trying to make things less worse in that regard by sort of maintaining some sort of semblance of ability to even get out of the chair, which is sort of an improvement over many other things. I'm going to be less concerned about the deuterium side at that stage. But obviously, long term, if you want to really biohack and basically for the best of your body, it's not only the contaminants ban, Paulus, but it's really the deuterium side of things that I don't like in a lot of these sort of processed, anything that's processed. Yes, definitely has, my dear, very much so. Just quickly going to see where I can see anything has benefits. Ask me again next time to go really through I may have to make a video on creatine and creatine loading and some of the no's and the do's and don'ts and some of the other stuff at some point. I'll do that. I'll put on my list. I'll remind myself. And have you got some stuff, have you?
Yep.
You should have said something.
I didn't want to interrupt you. And then one of them has a typo, but I did fix it later.
Okay. Oops.
At least we can end with a bang.
Yes, exactly. So there's about 3 there. And that's where I'm going to the typo one. And that's where I'm going to basically stop it. And the rest of it, you guys could actually leave questions in the comments field in that regard. And then I will get back to that stuff at some point. And turn it off and share the screen. And there we go. Deuterium in tap water and carbs. Mitochondria. God. And taken out. If I only saw it coming, I could have turned around and shot it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And live stream opinion.
It's the perfect reality delivered to the brain. And this is a remaster of an old
a remaster of
yep.
Oh yeah, the nano machines, mate. Nanomotors, mate. Nanomotors.
I actually recently played the game that the original template for this is from. It's such a cool game. It's Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Oh, look, I've gone back and played some old games as well, So it's I used to play all sorts of stuff. A lot of the sort of the Ghost Recon stuff and stuff like that.
Yes.
Raven Shield, which is even further back. Raven Shield was very hard because one shot and you were dead. So you had to really tactically be really careful the way you went around corners and stuff like that, and sort of go into sniper mode, check to make sure there's no one at any certain point you're not seeing any reflections, and then move on and take out. So you could actually be playing for one level for nearly half the damn day, trying to get through without getting killed. It's probably the reason why Raven Shield only didn't last very long, because it's a very hard game to play.
Yep.
Even though I did play it, but I'm a bit like that anyway. I like a challenge. Then they actually brought out a lot of games which respawned and stuff like that. Half-Life was one that I got into for a while as well.
Yes.
Yeah, played a lot of Half-Life in that regard. I'm trying to remember the other one that was an over-the-top, something Serious Sam. Ever played Serious Sam?
No, I haven't actually.
Well, Serious Sam was just over the top. You go in and the music starts picking up, and as everything comes at you like mad, you got all these weapons, you're firing like mad, and all you're doing is going in reverse, trying to kill everything inside. And then when you actually manage to knock everything off, then you can move to the next sort of level or through sometimes you may be going like through sort of an obstacle course or being attacked at the same time. So you're trying to shoot. That's why it's called Serious Sam. It's just over the top. It just goes mad and all that. So, but it was one game that I really enjoyed because it was just basically full on. You were like, it's just, it's very much a guy game, sort of. Sorry, ladies, but it's one of those you have to be. I remember there was like the walls were changing, like things were moving in, and these things were coming out, and you had to like move, then turn, start shooting like mad, and then slip through this narrow pathway, and then get to the other. It was just some weird movements you had to make in order to get through at the same time without being killed by all these things that were coming at you at the same time. So my approach was, as they were coming, I would head towards them, in a sense, and try and take out as many from the beginning. And then I had enough space to back up, because that's all I was doing, backing up all the way as I was taking out most of the opponents in order to basically then make it possible for me to get through, because it'd be impossible any other way. And that was the way you had to play it. Forward attack, rear defense, and then once the numbers came down, then you could actually progress forward. So it was well over the top. Anybody that knows Serious Sam knows exactly what I'm saying in that regard. Yes, Mousy. Oh, yeah. Oh, Mousy played Serious Sam. Oh, there you go. No wonder we click. Nuke Dukem. Yeah. 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 Nukem. We used to actually back at work, this was years ago, back in the 80s, when we had the first computers, that we sort of got, and we were actually playing on the network Duke Nukem. on our breaks when we played Duke Nukem. That management had no idea, and somebody dobbed us in, and that's how we got into a bit of trouble. We had to remove it from all our machines because we got dobbed in because somebody complained, the network, sort of in the middle, on the breaks, like afternoon and morning tea and all that, was basically slower than in the normal work time. And some people wanted to check their emails or check other things, and they're complaining that it was too slow. Well, we were basically playing, multiplayer games, against each other on this sort of thing. Yeah, sort of crazy times. But back then you could get away with it. I had the manager. Now, I'm not going to mention names, but he was one of those. He was from an agricultural background. He had this sort of thing, screaming out, "Serpanos, get to my office." And I was back then, and I was in my 20s. Get into my office, and I'll tell you off and stuff like that. And I've got a dressing down. So yes, he was a character. Anyway, yes, those were the days. Anyway, nowadays they'd probably fire you. They'd probably fire me for those sort of things that we did back then. It's a very different world. But anyway, thanks guys for turning up. Appreciate everybody that was here. Thanks for the questions. There were a couple of, most people I didn't sort of cover everyone. I wish I had. But, things are like that. And I will see a lot of you lovely people in a fortnight's time, if you're going to be asleep tonight, because in the next couple of hours, some people from the Americas in particular, you may be awake at some point. But, but for the rest of you from the Asian and Australasian region, I'll probably see you guys in about 4 hours from now at 6 o'clock. Australian Eastern Standard Time, that is, non-daylight savings winter time. So yes, so that's pretty much it. Thanks, guys, for being here. Appreciate it. See you all. You can see us off, Lukey.
Yep. So yeah, I just say thanks for the questions, everyone. Thanks for being here, and I'm glad to be here as well. And yeah, just keep fighting the crackpots, sharing the good information around, and we'll see y'all later. Stay well.
And I'll just pop really through all that. G'day, Sandra. She's probably just turned up. You're late. You're late. Dusters for you. Yes, and see you all.